Welcome to the Defiant Takes Football Show here on a Super Bowl Monday following up here. And I am Nick Merriam at Nick Sports, Nick with Sports on Twitter. Joined here for the first time in a little bit, I believe, by our Noah Ashtray Sports. How are you doing this morning, Noah, after a Super Bowl that was late night for you?
Yeah, doing well, man. Stayed up till about 4 or 5 in the morning watching the Super Bowl. Got my 8 hours of sleep, but forcing your schedule into a different way always throws you off a little bit. But I'm happy to be here, ready to talk some football.
Yeah, and it was quite the game. Really lived up to everything you were hoping for. I think we kind of got what we were hoping for in terms of like these were the 1A and 1B teams in the NFL. This was the best at its best. We got it on the grand stage. It was a close game, high scoring. The offenses really showed out. This is like the direction the NFL has gone in. I think it's kind of funny now. We've seen the Eagles in 2 Super Bowls in the past half decade ish. That have been like this, where it's just, they come in, they have this great defense, but they have to win a shootout. This time they come up kind of short, and also another really close, really good football game. And I really hate to have to start the discussion about this, but it is the kind of word on the street right now is the holding call at the end of the game is what everyone's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And, I live in Philly. I grew up here. This is a very passionate fan base. They deserve like their kudos for everything that's going into growing this organization to what it is. Like you need that support to get to the point they are in terms of just building something. But they have a reason to be upset, I think, this morning in terms of not getting an opportunity to go down the field and score late in the game. But it's an interesting discussion in terms of you see people saying, oh, in that point in the game, you shouldn't make a penalty call. And I disagree with that. I think if there's a penalty that needs to be called, it needs to be called. And then there's a couple other variables here. It's a holding call that I don't think gets caught on film. I think we keep getting this one shot where, the referee comes back and Carl Chevers, I believe, is talking about it. He's like, the right hand grabs the jersey. And you can't see the corner's right hand, Bradbury, the entire video. So there's that. There's also kind of this precedent of the Eagles in pass game where they lost to Washington, where there was a bunch of bad calls, taking accountability when maybe they weren't like really doing anything wrong. That's the type of team they are. Like they just kind of go, oh yeah, that was my fault. Like we messed up. So it might be one of those things where we never really know if it was holding or not. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Not being able to get the actual shot of it. Yeah, you would imagine that then the official had a good view of it on the field and made that call. But I do respect the Eagles and Bradbury especially for saying like, yeah, that was a holding. It happened. Taking responsibilities like kind of missing sometimes in the NFL, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that comes from the top down. Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, just the whole organization really like had a great week. I think Kansas City did too. Like these are model organizations and they go about their business the right way. And it's part of the reason why you expect them to both have a really good chance of getting back here. But it's tough. Like they had 30 cameras set up from a production standpoint, both that and referees' ability to see calls in the field. And it makes me wonder because I do know there are angles that the referees see that we don't get to. If there's something out there that's going to come out later and we're going to see it. But I think that broadcast did not show maybe everything that we could have seen to really like show that penalty in motion. But we'll wait on that. It might come out in the next 24 hours. It might not. We might just continue to have that one still shot of kind of Bradbury turning and then his arm is like tucked behind him. And I think a lot of people are looking at that left hand and seeing him like kind of like grasp, but he doesn't really pull the jersey. But also maybe there was something there because there's no depth perception on that angle because you can only see his hand. Just a very like strange like camera angle to get in a game where you expect to see everything.
Yeah, you think you'd have the whole field covered for the Super Bowl, and does kind of feel like maybe they're keeping it close to their chest, NFL, for a little bit. But yeah, maybe we'll get like a cell phone picture from somebody that had a good angle.
That's honestly what ends up happening at the end of the day most of these times, isn't it? I think the second thing that we need to talk about is probably quarterback play. Like this was the show between Mahomes and Hurts, and they both showed out and played their best ball. And I think Mahomes probably was supported more by the rest of his offense this game, and that could be what you point towards in terms of Kansas City winning is just how effective they were running the football. They brought back a lot of things we saw work against Philly early in the year, which specifically was counter. They made counter look a lot of different ways. They had, a split back sweep play that had counter. They played zone counter. They had counter from tight with a fullback. Like they were doing it in many ways, but I think when you saw the Eagles get gashed early in the season, it was like, they were just giving up 4 or 5 yards. The Chiefs were getting chunk plays on the ground with different players. And that really supported Mahomes in a way where he only had to throw 27 times in this game. And when they went into half, he had thrown it 13 times and they're losing by 10. And he only had to throw it 14 times in the second half. You would have, we're talking about the game at halftime. Like, the Chiefs are going to win this. I fully expect at this point the Eagles are going to win. If the Chiefs are going to win this, it's going to have to be the Mahomes show. He's going to have to be a superhero. And although I think to some extent you kind of saw that, it wasn't to the Mahomes level effort that you would have expected from a 38-35 win.
Yeah, not running around in the backfield for 6 seconds, making a crazy play, making 5 crazy plays in each quarter, just coming in and doing what he needed to do instead of having to put it completely all on his back like he usually does.
And there was an interview with him, I think, before the Super Bowl where he talked about how he didn't need to be the play hero ball in the Super Bowl, just let the game play out and just do what he could do. And I think you really saw that poise today. And I think when he did make plays, there were those wow plays where you're just like, man, that guy's ankle is not, he's not feeling good. He's scrambling. He's picking up 26 yards on a run to get them in field goal range. He made a couple of throws, falling to the ground. That one that was a low throw to Kelsey, which was also a great catch, comes to mind. But it was limited, right? They really kind of had him pick his spots. And I think that was a huge part of Kansas City's ability to get back into the game and allow really the play calling to take over against an Eagles defense that I think, my worry coming in was they haven't seen anything like this offensively. And it looked to a degree like, although physically they could match up, that was the case. And so, I think this was new for them. And I don't know that the Eagles, they definitely didn't get better as the game goes on. And that's ultimately that's kind of, I think, what kills them. On the other side of the ball, Jalen Hurts absolutely balled out. And I had come on the show and said, hey, man, I really want to see Hurts drop back pass, no play action when the defense knows it's happening, knows it's coming, and they have to throw it. And at halftime, I was texting people. I was like, we're not going to see this. It's not going to happen. They're going to run the ball. The game's going to end. And we ended up seeing it because, as it turns out, the Eagles really did not run the ball well between the tackles with their running backs at all in this game. This was the Hurts show. He needed to be the guy on the ground that picked up yards, and he had to throw the ball. And I think you saw some stuff from him that just we hadn't really quite seen yet. And I think if you're an Eagles fan, it's a great thing to hang your hat on a little bit, even though you lost, because I think going forward, this is the type of player that gives you a chance every season to compete.
Yep. Like you said, the running backs were struggling to run between the tackles. Between Gainwell, Sanders, and Scott, they had 37. They had 45 yards on 17 carries. Kenneth Gainwell had averaged 3 yards a carry, and Sanders and Scott averaged less than that. They were struggling big time, so they were leaning on the Jalen Hurts design runs for sure. But yeah, that was a big part of their game this season, and not being able to get to that definitely hindered them this game.
Yeah, and I think the Chiefs did a good job plugging up those interior gaps and forcing Hurts to run to the outside a lot. And Hurts gashed them for sure. And on third down specifically, Kansas City would go into kind of these, single high cover one shells. They'd play man, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but we kind of heard people talk about it pregame. A.J. Brown against press coverage is unbelievable because he's just a physical menace. But Devontae Smith isn't. And on the plays Smith kind of got big gains, it was cover 3, cover 4. He was able to push the envelope against zone and get open downfield. But against man, they kind of made it so that it would be Brown on a slant or Hurts has to scramble. And so the Eagles started calling these design draw plays. And the Chiefs, normally when you play cover 1, you have one guy left over. They ran some blitzes, but often what they were doing is they were just having him spy the quarterback.
Yeah. Yep.
And in one case, you have the fumble return for a touchdown, which is the biggest swing play in this game. And I think it's extremely unfortunate that ends up being that, because it's really kind of fluky and the type of thing that you could play better throughout a football game and lose because of that. And I think it's some reasonable assimilation, just looking at this game and counting it out, what mattered here. You could make an argument that this play in itself swings a game. And it's really Hurts, you could knock him, but really it's just kind of the Chiefs did a good job plugging yabs, and he drops the ball and there's no one there. And it's it's similar to the Bengals, getting their fumble return against Baltimore, which is like a good play defensively, but it kind of requires like a slight like mistake from the offense that is kind of out of the realm of something that you expect to happen, and just it's unfortunate. It almost happens again where they get. I didn't even think about this. They had Nick Bolton almost had another fumble return for a touchdown.
The incomplete pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I what were your thoughts on that? Because I thought that was like a really close one to me.
I think that's about as close as you can get, right? He got both his feet down, and the rule you have to make a football play, or is it have to be
It's
like
a football
attempting
move?
football move. I think he did not make a football move yet. He got his feet down and he got squared up, but he was holding the ball like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's not he didn't go to tuck it, but I mean, yeah, obviously not even that many years ago. That's 7 points for the Chiefs.
Yeah, that definitely is a call that I think nowadays you see more often get reversed. It was one of those to me where I was like, I could go either way with this, and I don't think people are going to like complain with either call. But that's another one that, like, again, it's the game kind of hinges a little bit on that, and you get a call one way, and we're going to focus on this one penalty at the end of the game, but like there are any number of things in a game in terms of officiating you could point out and really be like, this is what swings a game in one way or the other. And ultimately, like, you could do that with the fumble return, the punt return from Kansas City, which I think that's the momentum changing sequence right there, as the Chiefs go down the field, take the lead after forcing a field goal, which to me was like, you enter the half, the Chiefs had to score a touchdown coming out of the first half. They did their job. And the Eagles get the ball now. And I really thought we were going to get into this game of like, all right, the Eagles go down and they go up 10. The Chiefs go down, and it's a 3-point game. The Eagles go down the field, they go up 10. And it's just the Chiefs are be chasing the game. And they force that field goal. And that changes kind of the rhythm of the football game, where now Kansas City scores. The Eagles are trailing for the first time with Hurts as a quarterback since November, I believe.
Yeah,
probably against the Colts, honestly, I think is the last time they trail with Hurts as a starter, which is just ridiculous. And so like that was new for them. And I don't think that like the game changed because they were trailing. Like they didn't have to like go into like specific play calling at that point, but the quick punt followed by a big special teams play and another touchdown really, really, really flips this game from something where the Eagles feel like they're in control. All of a sudden, we have to get 8 like now, and we don't have a choice, right? And then credit to Hurts for getting them down the field and scoring those points. That was a very we're going to overlook that drive now just because they've lost, but for years here. But that is the type of drive that you think about your young quarterback. And you're like, have to get 8 in the Super Bowl. There's 5 minutes left. You're playing against Mahomes, and they do it. And just the Chiefs did such a good job of running the clock and really running the football to get down the field. Like they ran 4-minute offense to get into field goal range, and they just clocked it. And the penalty ultimately, ends the game for real. But if the Eagles get the ball back down 3, there's a minute and a half left. They have one timeout. Like the Chiefs still killed a lot of the clock on that drive. At some point, it really becomes a game of the Chiefs came into this and they knew they had to outscore Philly to win, and they managed it. And that's scary to think about because really, again, this is all built on an offensive line that's been reinforced, sure, but Kelsey, Mahomes, and play calling. And they continue to figure this out. I think everyone underrated, some people more than others. I still thought the Chiefs were going to win the division, but I think everyone underrated, how this receiving core would hold up without Tyreek Hill. They went out and they did what I have said over the years is the right thing to do when you're trying to replace one player. I think teams make the mistake of like, oh man, we lost like AJ Brown. Let's just draft Treylon Burks. And that'll be our star player. When reality, I think you should go out and you should get like 4 guys who are thought of as middling or developing players, and you hope one of them pops. And I don't think any of them pops for the Chiefs, but between Vaughn-Scantling, between Sky Moore, between Kadarius Toney, and Juju Smith-Schuster, they were able to have enough depth at that position group that they found the plays necessary to win.
I saw someone call it like a Moneyball method to replace Hill. And the Eagles responded so well to all the adversity in the game with the first fumble, scoop and score, and like I think they really almost negated that whole entire play. They responded well, they kept the lead, and they went into the half well, and it's tough. It's
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
tough.
they scored 24 points in the first half, and they held the Chiefs to 7 on offense. Hurts that big boo boo. He comes back and he plays. He throws for 300 yards, rushes for 70, sets a Super Bowl record for rushing touchdowns. We could have a whole discussion about the QB sneaks and whether like he's doing the work there, the offensive line really, but like outside of the QB sneaks, like a lot of the yards he picked up were on scrambles and breaking contain on, blitzes and getting, yards with his legs, which in itself is impressive. He did everything he had to win. They just, they ran out of time.
I saw someone else say that that penalty, was almost worse, or it was probably worse than just allowing a touchdown on that play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Because a touchdown there, they have much more time to come back and score rather than the Chiefs then had the time to milk even more clock and then score.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I think in the huddle you kind of have to say no penalties, but I think, sometimes veteran defenses will teach certain things that you might be able to get away with down and you want to take the gamble. I know like in almost every sport, there's some degree of that when you get to higher levels. Like they kind of talk about like, hey, like if you do this is technically a penalty, but like you usually can hide it from official and like you look to gain those advantages. And I guess technique wise, they probably have been doing that a little bit. And maybe the Chiefs have pointed out pregame, there's always this kind of mind game. But Bradbury doesn't get away with it. And it's tough because, you hate to see a game end like that. And I know a lot of people are just going to be upset this morning about like a game ending on a penalty and we're not getting us not getting to see the Eagles kind of finish the game. But at the end of the day, like if the penalty does turn out to be the correct call in the spot, like you can't let them play, which is something we're hearing. Like, oh, just let them play. It's like, okay, well, what if he like grabbed his face mask and tossed him to the ground?
Exactly.
Like, all right, like it's just
a penalty's a penalty.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
I hate seeing refs swallow their whistle at the end of games. I feel like that can almost be worse. But yeah, it's going to be discussed. It's going to half people are going to be angry, half people are going to be fine with it. It's just how it goes. Big games like that.
Yeah. Kyron's not here, but we should discuss, I think, offensive line play because I think that was the big takeaway from this game was just I thought that the Eagles unit offensive line was the best unit we had seen, period, outside of like singular quarterback play, maybe in the past decade plus. And they didn't really get it going on the ground today. And I think the physicality of the Chiefs defense was maybe underrated coming in. Really, they came up. You saw it early. Like they were playing from kind of deep shells and like expecting to get hit with these long throws. And this was something I talked about in a previous podcast. It was like, oh, Washington did a good job of this. So they'd come out in too high and they would rally up and just hit because you have to be expecting, okay, we've covered everything up, but now they have Hurts who can scramble and like quick dumps to like Dallas Goedert for 8 yards over the middle. You need to be ready to cut down those angles and either prevent scrambles from getting, 6-7 yards. And same thing with those passes to Goedert. And to a degree that was maybe lesser, but worked for the Chiefs, they were able to do that. So it forced the Eagles to go to exterior runs, which I don't think with the running backs they do as well. So they, leaned on Hurts a little bit more. And they adjusted well to an extent, but I would have liked to see maybe a little more screen game from the Eagles just to get their offensive line running out that direction. I don't think we saw enough of it. They definitely had the RPOs going. But that's something they probably will look back on and realize that they could have added a little bit more to this game. They're a very good screen team. Like they run outside zone nonstop when they're all stretch, at least. Not a little different from outside zone. They run stretch plays, but when they get their offensive line going, and that's, schematically very similar to what you block on a screenplay. They could have done that kind of to get the defense moving a little more horizontally.
Yeah, I feel like if you have a very, very talented offensive line and you're struggling to do the simple stuff correctly, then definitely scheming up some more complicated stuff can throw the other team off, obviously, and get your guys, like you said, out in space and making those big blocks on the outside that they obviously needed.
But outside of the scheming of like the run, the short, extension of the run to open up the pass, like the pass protection from both teams was awesome throughout this game. And I think Philly, had to deal with some blitzes. The Chiefs did a kind of somewhat bad job, but also hurts his eyes at the back of his head, keeping contained. So he's able to escape a couple of times. But Kansas City's pass blocking might make this game. They really held up against the Eagles 4-man rush. There's kind of a saying that goes around the league, and I don't how much like people in the media like really know it, because I see people talking about, especially like Rex Ryan, who will like talk about blitzing Mahomes. It's like, you can't blitz Mahomes. Like he's the guy, like the one guy in the league that if you're going to blitz him, like he's just going to find the guy that's open immediately. He's very good at that. Him and Brady really the two. Although I think to an extent, like Brady, if you can get to him quickly, like his pocket presence is more about sliding away from pressure.
Yep.
So if you can fool him, like you can hit him before he gets the ball out. Mahomes has the ability to kind of manipulate his body and throw from weird angles. And you saw this in this game, like the times that the Eagles were able to get pressure on him, he was able to do that to complete passes. But really, it didn't happen a whole lot because he had a clean pocket for the majority of the night, really, which I was surprised by.
Yeah, definitely. The Eagles led in sacks, and everyone expected at least a couple of hits on Patrick Mahomes, but he showed that he is one of the slipperiest quarterbacks. He is great at avoiding sacks, even if he's holding on to the ball for 5-6 seconds. And that's just something that you can barely take into account for as a defense,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's where people get the thing like, oh, don't blitz him because he's either going to run away from you or just find the open man.
Yeah. And the scrambling when things did break down to get yards after his ankle was hurt in the second half is just, there's a number they use Sports Info Solutions to like measure clutch performance for a quarterback. And that's just like, I'm not like the biggest fan of using that as a measurement because I think it's inconsistent for player per player, but you do see some players where it's like very clear that they like raise their level of play when it matters. And you could tell that this is a game where like Mahomes is hurting, but it's a Super Bowl and he's like going to put everything on the line. He is running into contact in the red zone instead of sliding to get those extra yards because this is it. Like he doesn't get another chance. Right. Exactly. And I think even like the smallest thing to like pick up this extra 3 yards, there's a famous clip of John Elway and like the helicopter spin when he's running at like age 39 in the Super Bowl. Like that stuff like gets the rest of the team going because that's your leader,
100%.
Just like putting your body on the line. And it definitely was a influence, I think, to getting them to play better down the stretch.
Yeah, those intangibles, stuff like that, momentum and just your leaders giving it their all. It's something that's hard for guys like us that like the analytics. It's hard for something that you can put a number on stuff like that, but it's definitely a huge part of football and all sports.
Something that I wanted to bring up actually that I went to at the beginning of the season or beginning of this past couple of weeks to try and figure out who I was going to pick. And by the way, like I never said on the show, maybe I did, I don't remember, but I thought the Eagles were going to win going into the game, and I was wrong. I thought top to bottom they're a better team. I thought this was a clear matchup of like the Eagles are the complete team with better game management from their coaches. And I think we saw that there were some like situational decisions from Kansas City I didn't like as much. We can get into that a little bit later, but schematically, maybe the Chiefs were a little better. And then they just had the one player that was the best player on the field. That's Mahomes. Mm-hmm. But, oh man, where was it? Yeah. So I thought the Eagles were going to win. And the reason I came to that conclusion was the whole year I was like, oh, the AFC is the better conference. Like they have more teams at the top that are playing well. And I still think going into the playoffs, like you look at the 7 teams in the AFC versus the 7 teams in the NFC, like the AFC was better. But if you look at the whole 16, maybe there's a bit of a drop off at the bottom, whereas the NFC has more middling teams kind of battling, like the Green Bays, the Washingtons, the Detroits that weren't in the playoffs. So I went and I looked at head to head. I was like, okay, what is the record of the AFC versus the NFC this year in 80 matchups? I wonder which conferences run more. You know what the record is?
What?
It's 40 wins for the NFC and 40 for the AFC. So I was like, all right, well, that's not going to be able to solve anything. So I could have, dived a little deeper and looked at like efficiency in those games.
Yeah.
That just wasn't like worth my time. So, I ended up going with the Eagles just because I felt that that was my feeling going into the week. And I still think, maybe on paper, like if we play this matchup 10 times out of 10, like the Eagles probably are more likely to win the majority of those matchups. But, that's why you play the games, I guess. At the end
Exactly.
Getting into kind of the game decisions from Kansas City that I thought really kind of put them in a hole early is it's almost become a thing in the NFL with every team that you defer to the second half because it's just you want the ball when you have more information. Like it makes complete sense to do that in almost all cases. But I actually think this was a game where Kansas City wins a toss. I thought they should have taken the ball. And my whole thing was, again, talking about the Eagles and how well they play as front runners and just how dominant they are once they get that lead is I was afraid that the moment the Eagles go down the field and score a touchdown and get the lead, kind of like we saw against the Giants, we saw against the Niners, we saw against like every team they played all year, it becomes like a very difficult game for you to win from behind because they play from a leverage of we can run anything offensively. We can blitz you. Just there's a lot going on there, right? And so that happens, and I feel like the game kind of immediately gets out of reach for the Chiefs. They flipped it on its head by putting themselves in a situation in the second half where they could, if they could go down the field and score, they put some pressure back on the Eagles, and they managed that. But again, I think if they don't score that touchdown at the beginning of the second half, like this game's over. I don't think there's any way they get back into this football game. So
yeah, I think it was. No, you can keep going.
You go ahead.
I think it was pretty obvious that the Eagles the whole week were going to try to keep Mahomes off the field. That's just what everyone wanted to do. And so, yeah, I think your sentiment is right that the Chiefs might, obviously it worked out in the end, but if they won the toss, it would have been smart to take the ball first, come down and score those points to start the game to make the Eagles play from behind. But yeah, stopping the run was probably another big thing that helped them while they were playing from behind, which was completely unexpected, like we mentioned before. But yeah, I agree. I think it seems like it would have been smarter for the Chiefs to take that ball first.
Yeah, and maybe this backfires, and like if they don't get a lead and the Eagles are winning a half, they get the ball first. I'm wrong, but I think it probably changes the game script a little bit if you can put them a little under pressure, which we just haven't seen early now. We've seen it late now. We haven't seen it early. I don't know like if it really matters as much, but it's interesting. And the other thing was not going for it on 4th and 3, in my opinion, tied at 7. And I think like this is more of a lesson in like the risk of kicking field goals. Sometimes it's just the Harrison Butker has had like an up and down season, and he doinks off the left upright, and just if you make it, you're up 10-7, but the Eagles eventually go down the field and would have had a lead where you need to score a touchdown to get back in the game anyways. I don't think this was the game to do that. And the Eagles responded by going for it on 4th down twice on the next drive and converting both of them.
Yeah, that's kind of a big in your face kind of moment after, not about pushing the fourth down calls. And I saw someone complaining about the Eagles not going for it. I don't know. I think they were still in their own territory late in the game, maybe on a 4th and 2 or 4th and 3, and they punted it. I saw someone complaining about that after. I mean, they'd been successful on the 4th downs like the whole entire game, but
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because like I think a lot of people make these arguments in the faith of like responding to outcomes, and that's difficult because it's not really what you're supposed to do.
That's not what you're supposed to do at all.
In this case, like the outcome is not great, so it's easy for me to stand here and be like, yeah, you should have gone for a 4th down. But again, your best player in the field is Mahomes, and you want to give him more opportunities. And at this point, like you haven't seen his ankle be an issue. You're moving the ball well. They missed this field goal. The Eagles got on the field. Punt, they have a turnover, they have the ball back, they get on the field. You don't like you're on the field for like a minute after this for the next 15 minutes of football. And you kind of put your offense in the rut of not having had played a whole lot and having to kind of rebound through halftime and get their, amped up again so they can go score. But I think that's part of it, right? Is like you're just taking away opportunities for you to eat the clock, give your quarterback opportunities. And at the end of the day, like I don't, if you make that field goal, you're in a better situation at the end of the game. But ultimately, like, let's say like the penalty doesn't go their way and they kick a field goal up 41-35. Like now the Eagles are still in a situation where they go score a touchdown and win the game at the end of the game, which I think you would have been fearing regardless of if you had that extra 3 points or not. So it's one of those things with the benefit, I think, in a game where you're expecting teams to score, the 3 points just doesn't really add a whole lot.
Yeah, I think that's something that the casual fan doesn't take into account as much as that, like going for it, and it's the positive that you can get from actually doing this is almost all the time outweighing like the negative result of that. Like, yes, you give them good field position. Yes, they have a chance to score on you now, but like converting those 4th downs, like you said, chewing more clock, and you're just keeping your offense on the field and giving your incredibly potent offenses just 4 more chances to make a huge play and put yourself just that much farther ahead. Yeah, it's definitely, people definitely think it's outcome oriented, but it should never be like that. It's you got to decide before you know the results. Obviously.
And we saw the whole game, like the Chiefs were capable of dialing up like really great play calls when they needed to. It was in their bag. Maybe they were saving them for later, but clearly like later they mattered. But I have a hard time believing that they didn't have something dialed up for that situation they could have gone to. But, Andy Reid on the spectrum of like conservatism in terms of like going for it on fourth down and game management and, using your timeouts correctly, things like that. Like he's not the highest on the spectrum, but he's still not quite like in the, maybe let's say like Kyle Shanahan realm of like always punts on fourth down. But the Eagles just do it so well and have all these like little things that they've added to their ability to gain advantages from, not even using timeouts. Like we see in this game, they have a 3rd and 9 and they get delay a game and they don't call timeout because at the end of the day, like they trust their offense more to pick up a 3rd and 14 than they want to like use a timeout prior to that end game sequence, which is crazy.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah.
But it's also like, when you think about it, probably correct because it's just you're still kind of the definition of like a deep pass versus like a middling pass in a lot of circles is 15 yards. So they probably had that as their limit because later we saw another delay a game on 3rd and 11 and a 3rd and 16. They did call the timeout to prevent 3rd and 16. So that was probably the limit in terms of doing that right at the edge, but they trusted their ability to pick up that 3rd down and 3rd and 14 and got it. And then a worst case scenario is like, okay, we're punting, we're pinning them back. And we still have our timeout. And I think those timeouts are just so valuable and teams kind of, they don't use them. They use them correctly, but like
not to their fullest potential, maybe.
Yes. You gain a lot of leverage at the end of games by still having 3 specifically because of, you have 3 downs to stop a team. So, there's a big jump from having 3 timeouts to 2, right?
Huge
that is like
at the end of the game,
and even like you could probably do a whole analysis of this, but I would expect that the jump from importance of having 3 versus 2 is bigger than the importance of having 2 versus 1. Even like it's just you have the ability to control the clock on a possession if you can maintain all those timeouts. And ultimately, because they do use one of them, it kind of hurts them at the end of the game because they could have maintained about 45 seconds on the clock at the end here, and it would have been they still would have had to get into field goal range, or they would have no timeouts, but they also ended up kicking a field goal in the 3rd and 11 anyways. So you could say that maybe even that wasn't managed to its best at the end there by Philly, but it's just such a small thing that they've done so well all year that it's kind of hard to like really be like, this is something you could have done better. But ultimately, like this was a really fun chess match to watch. And this is gonna suck for a few days just living in Philly, like going out, like getting groceries and seeing people like be all upset about it. And it's sad because these people put their heart and soul into it. And from my perspective, like I grew, growing up here is just tough, man. Like people gave me such crap for being a Washington fan. And it was miserable at times. But so this is very much like a morning where I either am going to be like, I feel bad for this whole fan base, and this is just it's a crappy way to like wake up on a Monday morning. But also, like if they had won, I know I'd be sitting here like just sad as hell and just like, oh, this is really tough for me because I don't want to deal with this. But it's just this is the swings of the ups and downs of a Super Bowl, and I just hope that one day like I get to experience it because it obviously like this whole city like has had a lot of fun between this and the World Series and even the MLS team, like going on runs this year, just it does a lot for the culture of your town, like just be a part of it. And it's fun to see that come through. And even Kansas City, like, Kansas City obviously has its culture and it's deep rooted in sports. Like they've had the Royals for a long time. The Athletics were there for a little bit. Like the Chiefs obviously have been there forever. Hockey didn't quite work out there, but neither did basketball, but they love their sports team. They love their Chiefs. You see the videos of them lining up at 9 a.m. in the morning, tailgating football games. And it's done a lot for that city as well to have the Chiefs be as good as they are. And ultimately now, like they have a legacy. Like Patrick Mahomes is going to be in discussions for like one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He already is, but now you're like really having a talk. And I remember like back a couple of years when they played the Patriots, the discussion from my perspective was like, okay, he has to beat Brady if he ever wants to catch him in rings. Like, it's going to be really hard for him to lose this. Brady gets to 7. You're still at 1. Now you have to win 6 more Super Bowls, right?
Yeah.
But I'm wondering now, like, is there a chance where we end up in the kind of a LeBron Jordan scenario where, like, Mahomes gets to, like, 3 or 4, and we look at his body of work, and we're like, okay, that guy is a better player. He could end up getting to as many Super Bowls as Brady, but just not winning as many.
Yeah, it's the terrible discussion of is success more important than talent, than skill, than their body of work. Michael Jordan is the greatest like winner in basketball, but LeBron James is obviously the most physically gifted, talented basketball player ever, because it's just he's just that kind of person. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes did a lot for his legacy, winning this game on the injured ankle, and like we said, he played within himself while also being that Superman that he is, and making those big flashy plays, and contorting his body, throwing from different slots, and just doing what he does while being a part of the team, which is, I think that's a big step in his development.
Yeah, and it's the two Super Bowl thing has long been the kind of the status
Yep.
quo for quarterbacks making the Hall of Fame. It's not for everyone. Like Dan Marino, like very clearly statistically would get in. Fran Tarkenton before him was the guy who had all the records, and he gets in as well. So it's not consistent for all of them. But like Jim Plunkett's really the only guy with 2 Super Bowls who hasn't gotten in, despite not being like, and it's because he wasn't like an excellent player. But Eli Manning, who I think throughout his career was, middling at times, good at
Yes.
other times, is probably going to get in because of 2 rings. I have a handshake bet with a friend actually about whether he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer or not. I don't think he will be, but he's probably going to
I
get
don't
in
think
at
he
some
will
point.
too, but
Yeah,
yeah.
he's a Giants fan, so that was an interesting
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt like he's going to be in the Hall of Fame by the end of his career at this point. Like he could retire right now and he would be in. I think that's like you could say like I'd cut my pinky off if that weren't the case, and he probably would still get in. And I'd be safe. Like I don't think that there's really much of a chance of that being wrong. But 2 Super Bowls in 5 years is a higher rate of championship winning than Brady's 7-21. It's 40% versus 33%. So he's technically like kind of on the path, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
man. Yeah,
there,
exactly. He's at least on pace a little bit.
But there's a whole thing now playing to like as old as Brady did, and that's difficult in itself. And it's going to be tough to get to that point. I wouldn't expect it at all. I think if Mahomes ultimately gets another one or 4, like you're really like feeling good about your career. And even now, like already, like he could retire and we'd feel great about it. I think if you want to make an argument that talks about accolades and like maybe uses some metric to measure how good Mahomes would be, I tweeted earlier, he's the first Super Bowl who really like breaks that 15% threshold of being like a large part of your salary cap and winning a Super Bowl. Like this is a good Chiefs roster. They've done a good job of building it up. By no means with like an average quarterback are they a Super Bowl team. So this is really like more on him of a type of Super Bowl ring as we've seen from any other quarterback, you could argue.
Yeah, I agree. Because the mold now is get as many players, great players on their rookie contracts, and that's how you're a good NFL team at this point, honestly. And the fact that Patrick Mahomes can break that mold is, I think, very, very telling to his accolades and his skill.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we see this game. They probably got outplayed. They win by a late field goal. And this is the one team we've seen win this way with a paying your elite quarterback, and he is the best of the best. And we continue to see these teams kind of get to Super Bowls by drafting rookie quarterbacks, arranging their roster so they can, maximize talent around them, and then win kind of flash in the pan Super Bowls where they will not. Maybe they will get back, but like they probably won't have a team as talented. I think the Eagles have another year now where they're going to be in this range of like they're still not paying Hurts a whole lot. They're going to be able to like surround him with talent and be really good again next year. But after that, it gets a little interesting. Like I think he's probably better than the Matt Staffords and the Dak Prescotts of the world. He's probably in line closer to like the Lamar Jacksons and the Trevor Lawrences, but we haven't seen Lawrence play on a deal yet. We haven't seen Jackson play on a deal yet either, but you could argue the Ravens really haven't surrounded him with enough talent as is. It's going to be interesting to see what the team looks like post paying Hurts. And then, if they're more of like an 11-12 win team that doesn't really push the envelope of winning Super Bowls, how does the market structure change in a way that we're like, okay, we have to manage paying these guys so that you can actually compete, because otherwise they eat so much of your salary cap that you just aren't winning.
So you're thinking at some point, top end talent, let's say quarterback, maybe tackle, you think the market's going to drop at some point.
I think at some point we might see it grow at less of a rate. Like we saw guys get paid from like 35 to 30. Like it jumped from the Cousins deal, which was low 30s, to Mahomes at 50 in like 2.5 years, right?
Yeah,
like we went up
insane.
$20 million. So are we going to start seeing guys get paid like at a similar level while the salary cap grows? Because it's just hard to like really pay a guy a fifth of your salary cap so that you can't fill out everything else. And again, like the Chiefs model this season was find cheap options at wide receiver. They invest in their offensive line. They have Chris Jones on defense, and they've added some rookies here and there on the defensive side. But ultimately, this is not like the weakest unit in this game is the defense of the Chiefs, right?
Right.
Like it is the unit that is most easy to expose on the back end. Their pass rush has upside because of Jones, but they ultimately didn't do a whole lot in this game. I think what the Chiefs will like really come together in this game is their ability for their linebackers, safeties, and corners to rally and tackle, which is a thing that, again, like I don't think is too difficult to find if you're really looking for that specifically. But in their case, like they're winning because of an offensive line that they've invested heavily in, a couple of players on defense they're paying a lot of money, and then just being smart about cheaply paying talent around the quarterback. And that's an interesting thing build wise. Like, is it going to be tough for teams to replicate that if they don't have a quarterback of Mahomes' talent level?
Or if you don't have a Travis Kelce, or if you don't have an Andy Reid.
Yeah, and that's true. Like these are variables that other teams don't have. And I think like we look at Buffalo right now, and I think Buffalo like has shown they can beat the Chiefs. Like they're a team that, some people are like, oh, is their Super Bowl window closing? It's no, like they're still in it. But obviously they're paying out a lot of money. They've done a good job to get like a star that like the Stephon Diggs is their Travis Kelce, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have Ken Dorsey, but I don't know like if he's going to be there forever. And I don't know that he's like on the level of Brian Daboll before him. The offensive line, they can probably serve to like their investment has been the defensive line. And that was very good for a little bit until Von Miller got hurt. And maybe like that's the unit that's good enough to put them over the top. But we've had kind of a year sample size of this. So we're going to get another one. We're going to see how that goes. The Bengals might do the same thing where instead of investing in like O-line or D-line, it's their receiving core because they've shown they can win with that. I don't know. It's going to be kind of interesting to see how this goes in terms of invest with one quarterback, invest in one position group, and just overload it, right? That you feel good about. And then just everything else you kind of have to just on a whim figure out. And that appears to be the model. And then, you have to have a good enough coaching to really take you there, which of those three, I think Cincy is probably the team that's lacking the most in their coaching, especially on the offensive side. Lou Anarumo does a very good job defensively, but he could be getting the Cardinals job here. We'll see in a second if that happens, how that affects them. But it appears just because of the limitations of your resources, like you have to shoot for an elite unit, right, outside of your quarterback. And so you have to overload. And just I think we've kind of expected off-season additions to be fill in these spaces, make sure you just have no bad units. But at the end of the day, like what wins Super Bowls is the variance of having something that can dominate the game.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's definitely something that people, when you think you're building a team the correct way, is you think you try to get everything to the same level. But I think you're right. You need a dominant group of one position.
And even so, like the Chiefs' offensive line, I think is the second best offensive line in football behind the Eagles, and I think there's a gap, right? But it's good enough on its own still to hold up, and it's kind of funny. Like the response to them losing to the Bucs is to build up that unit because they just were so horrific in that game, and that was mostly because of injuries. But they were getting older. Mitchell Schwartz was close to retiring, as good as he was. And it just happens to be like this is the unit they needed to be good for this run. Like if they had decided that they needed to bulk up on pass or really anything else, pass for secondary receivers, I think they wouldn't have won the Super Bowl because of Mahomes' ankle injury. Like they needed the O-line to be the unit for this run.
Yeah, and they definitely showed that they can handle it and protected Mahomes when it really mattered the most. And that's what you were saying.
Yeah, and I think that they would be smart to reinvest in tackle. We mocked Dawan Jones to them at right tackle in the last mock draft. Andrew Wiley, a guy you could probably upgrade on. Orlando Brown, they might tag again. If not, I think still they probably should maybe draft a couple of tackles, maybe one later in the draft, just to make sure you're developing a guy. Lucas Niang has been a good swing tackle for them, but I don't know how much they trust him considering Wiley's still starting over him at right tackle. They need to make sure that position group's locked down. And it's much like the Eagles. Like, I just think, their identity is that offensive line. Like, they're going to have a tough time if they really start trying to fill in at corner, maybe add a third receiver or linebackers. Like, no, you need to make sure that what works for you now is what's going to work for you in the future when you're paying Hurts $50 million a year.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's definitely something that not a lot of people think about. You think that you have that dominant unit, and a lot of people rely on that to be dominant next year just without doing much to it. And athletes change year to year, injuries happen, and sometimes guys just fall off. As you can see with the Colts, our offensive line was our calling card. We didn't do anything besides, we did do some moves, but I did not think they were the good ones. So yeah, you saw huge regression from great players as well.
Yeah, do you want to transition actually into that? Kyron might be hopping on here at 11-ish, but we're going to talk a little bit about the AFC South as well. And there's only so much we can really say about the Super Bowl other than about team building, the Chiefs and the Eagles, and just how they got here. I think everyone's going to be breaking this game down probably all week long, but
yeah, for sure.
We have gone into the game. We've talked about the team building itself, and I think it's clear at the end of the day, like, these two teams deserve to be there. The winner, regardless of who it was, you have to feel good about as your Super Bowl champion, which I'm not so certain I felt great about last year. But in this case, like, I think that the play in the Super Bowl spoke for itself. These teams were the best two teams in the NFL.
Yeah, the last time was the Eagles Patriots, the two number one seeds, and since then this has definitely felt like the game where the two most deserving teams and the two best teams made the Super Bowl and played it in an incredible game. It was really nice to watch without having a dog in the fight. It was pretty relaxing, pretty entertaining for me.
Yeah, and PFF, by the way, just has given Jalen Hurts the highest grade for a Super Bowl from a quarterback that they've ever had. So, people were kind of joking like that Hurts might win MVP as like a loser.
Yeah, dude. I mean, he had every right to. He had every right.
I think you could have made a very good argument that Hurts deserved to maybe pull home that MVP trophy despite losing the game. But I think maybe the NFL telling you that is maybe at times of old that's not going to happen anymore because of this. But it's a good thing the Eagles can rely on their quarterback going forward, because I think
for sure.
I may have been in the minority, but I wanted to see a little bit more from him. And that was exactly what I needed to see from Jalen Hurts to be convinced that he is everything worth what they're going to pay him. He's going to be a very rich man and hopefully has a very long and lucrative and successful career in the NFL.
Yeah, good for him. I really like Jalen Hurts. I like the way he plays. I like the way he presents himself. He's got a cool personality too.
Mm-hmm. And I think we just underrate like how valuable of a runner he was coming into the year. Like, I was very much a guy who was like, Lamar's on his own as a runner, and then it's like Kyler and Hurts, and like there's a big gap between those guys and Lamar. I think he's crept closer to Lamar, and I think Lamar's regressed a little bit. I think he's gotten a little beat up, a little old, like not older, but just I think it's hard to like be the same player you were coming in the NFL 4 or 5 years later. But I think Hurts' unique running style of just kind of a hybrid between what we've used to with like the Lamar running types. We've seen kind of 3 different successful runners. We saw RG3, who was not sustainable, which is like the straight line runner only and nothing else. And just, he runs into contact and gets, just destroyed. We've seen Cam Newton, who is, the Trey Lance mold, maybe the Sam Howell mold we'll see, of more of like a power runner, like get downhill, be physical. And we've seen Lamar, who is shifty and to be able to accelerate, use his quickness to get into space and create his own space to get yards, but then get out of bounds as well and avoid contact because of that shiftiness. Hurts is kind of a hybrid between that Newton and Lamar running style, where he has the shiftiness, he has the speed. It's not quite Lamar's level, but he also has the power. And although he's not quite as big as Cam Newton,
he's strong. He is a strong runner. And I saw one of the sneaks where Jones jumped over the line and had Hurts by the neck.
Yeah.
Obviously he was getting the boost from the guys behind him, but just to be able to churn your legs and stay on your feet with Chris Jones hanging around your neck, like that is That is some
Yeah.
pure strength right there, man.
That is like squatting a lot and just
Yeah,
doing
dude,
that
for
nonstop.
real.
Like he made a decision sometime in Alabama's weight room that was just going to be a thing he was going to do, right? And I think like maybe you could even say accidentally it has become like a calling card or the part of his game. But it's just like if you're good at something in life, like do it and just see where it takes you. And in his case, like he has added that level to his game that we haven't really seen from anyone else where he can make you miss in space. He can run. He's not going to outrun everybody, but if he gets matched up on a corner, like you're going to be physically outmatched by Jalen, despite him he's not like a huge dude. Like he's 6'1", 220. He's like similar size to some of these guys who came out in the last draft. And you're like, they're too small to be top picks. And I think, it's unfortunate that Hurts kind of fell in the draft the way he did, because there definitely were some people who were fans of him, some people who thought he had no shot at all. There was a video of like Brandon Walker circulating where he's like, that guy's not an NFL quarterback. It's like, I don't know, maybe as a passer, like clearly he needed to develop, but he was accurate in college, just really didn't have the NFL ready ability to operate an offense. We've seen that develop through the way the Eagles have been smart about working him in through RPOs, read option, and getting him involved in more of a developed passing game eventually. But then also, just that run game was such a high floor. And I think people expected that from, Malik Willis. We didn't see it as much. Yeah. Whereas with Jalen Hurts, like really, like we saw him run the ball at Alabama against top competition in the SEC, against Clemson, against like good teams in the playoff. And you had to expect that was going to translate to the NFL. And I think that was a miss on our part, scouting him, especially in the NFL. Like the Eagles, brilliant process in taking more quarterbacks, getting him at 53, which is just silly to think about now. And just, that is one of the draft picks of the decade for sure.
All right, we got Kyron here. Let's see what Kyron's got to say about the Super Bowl. What up, Kyron?
What's up? Is the mic good? I got a new mic, so trying to test it out.
Ooh, sounded nice.
It does. It sounds good.
Cool.
You got any quick thoughts, man?
Yeah. In a vacuum, I really enjoyed the game from the beginning to about the last 45 seconds of the game. I thought it was one of like the most entertaining Super Bowls we've seen in a long time, top to bottom. The quarterback play was superb on both sides. Both offensive lines dominated. It wasn't just a solid performance, or we didn't just see them, do well in spurts. Both offensive lines dominated the game from start to finish. Really didn't have a sack. We didn't have a sack for the Chiefs, and then the sack for the Eagles was Jalen Hurts was running away, and he probably should have thrown the ball away, and then they gave it to Kalen Saunders on that runaway. So didn't really get any sacks. Both teams ran over 100 yards. I mean, it was just extremely impressive in the trenches yesterday. And just that second half of coaching from Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy was just incredible, man. They had one incompletion, and that was on a throwaway. I mean, it was just pretty crazy stuff.
I was saying to Noah, like the thing that shocked me most about this game in the second half was that you go into halftime as the Chiefs, and Mahomes has thrown it 13 times, and he's beat up. And I think everyone at where I was watching the game was kind of thinking like, oh, we need a superhero Mahomes moment if they're going to win this game. And in the second half, he only throws it 14 times. Like they managed to kind of scheme up some brilliant running plays, and like credit to the offensive line for making those holes. Credit to Isaiah Pacheco. Credit to Jerick McKinnon for like blocking and being a fullback in this game. Credit to the receivers for getting out there and clearing out and also getting blocking on their own. But just this was about as good of a rushing performance in a Super Bowl I think we've seen from a team, maybe like in years, in my opinion. It was excellent from them.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people, and I hate how this kind of gets, reduced down to the quarterback. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about quarterback and Mahomes, but I think this was Andy Reid's crowning moment more than it was Patrick Mahomes. Like Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, Eric deserves just as much credit. I mean, when Pat comes to the sideline, he may say a quick word to Andy, but he goes right to Eric. Him and Eric go sit down on the bench. They're the ones on the iPads or the Outlook tablets. They're the ones on the Outlook tablets. Those are the guys that are game planning and making the adjustments. Eric is the one that's in his ear on a possession basis and in the meeting rooms as well. This is from Patrick Mahomes' mouth itself. So I don't want Eric Bieniemy to get lost into the fray here because he's just as important to this train.
Yeah.
But I think that second half of coaching, it showed the difference in coaching, right? And the gap is, and I don't want to say Sirianni did a bad job. I know people were hounding Sirianni a little bit, but it shows how like minute the margin for error is. It's like he had two bad possessions, I believe. He called two bad possessions. The possession where they end up having a punt and the possession where they end up getting a field goal to start the third quarter. They had the ball for like 11 minutes combined. Like, that's a long time to have the football. You bled a lot of clock. You had a lot of yards. You piled up a lot of stats, but you didn't finish, right? I thought they did spend too much time on RPOs, wide stuff, some wide zone stuff that wasn't really effective. They didn't really have any success off of that. The most success they had off the RPO stuff was just pulling the ball and throwing it quick. I mean, they had a success throwing it to A.J. Brown over the middle. He had a couple quick ones. Smitty had a couple. Other than that, they found themselves in third and long a lot. And Jalen was just making throw after throw on third down, or they get into third and or fourth and short, and then they just do the quarterback sneak. But I felt that it was just too difficult for the Eagles on offense sometimes. And I think they kind of just went overlooked when Jalen and those guys were just balling at such a high level that they're kind of overcoming those things. But I mean, look at the drive that they went up to score 21-7 on. I mean, I think he had a 3rd and 8, a 3rd and 14. He had another third down conversion. Like, those aren't typical things you see from that offense. I thought they did a pretty poor job of staying ahead of the sticks, and I thought that they should have. I should have saw a lot more power run game. You kind of saw it on the last full possession that they had. I don't really count that last possession. They had 8 seconds, had to throw a Hail Mary. It's not really a possession, in my opinion, but that last full possession, they really started to get. I saw some gap scheme stuff, some real downhill run game, and then it subsequently opened up the pass game. That's when you saw that wide open pass to Smitty. It's like, I felt we should have saw that a little bit earlier, as opposed to a lot of this wide zone and those RPOs stuff. But that was my only complaint from the coaching standpoint. I thought those 2 possessions really hurt them. And I was in a group chat with a couple guys, and they're like, you can't blame the offense. 35 points is too. I'm like, I'm not blaming the offense. I'm just saying 35 points wasn't enough.
Yeah.
The defense didn't play well enough, and the game was winnable. The fact that you had 35 points, and I think you left probably 10 points out on the field at least. And then the fumble as well. I mean, you fumble the ball. I mean, that was that never happens to Jalen. It never happens to anybody, really. Like, you never see that. You never see that play in general, but especially a guy like Jalen Hurts. But in no way am I blaming the offense or the coaching. I'm saying that's how small the gap is between winning the Super Bowl and not winning the Super Bowl. Those small little decisions cost you 2 drives, and those 2 drives ended up costing you the football game at the end of the day. So I hope it's a learning experience. I think they'll be fine. I know a lot of people are kind of worried about the roster because, I mean, they do have a lot of guys that are going to be free agents, but I think that they'll be okay. Some of those guys will want to come back. And now they're one of the most desirable destinations as far as free agency as well. So, and we all trust Howie. We figure Howie will put together a good roster. So,
and I think, if among us that we're still maybe slightly doubting Jalen Hurts, I am now fully on board. That was a performance worthy of maybe the MVP despite losing. Just he was excellent. And you talk about how many times they put themselves in third down situations, third and long. I wanted to see him when he had to drop back the defense, know they're throwing it, and we saw it. He was fitting tight throws into tight windows, being accurate, making correct decisions, getting it to his best players consistently, and pushing the ball down the field, they made more explosive pass plays in this game than the Chiefs. If you had told me that the morning of Sunday, I would have been like, oh, there's no way they lose that game, right? I think you're right. The fumble play, is just a really unfortunate, fluky play that it's really hard to be upset about if you're the Eagles, or wow, that was a great play by the Chiefs either. Just it kind of happens to happen, and just ultimately that might just it really does kind of flip the game on its head in a game where, from my perspective, I thought the Eagles outplayed Kansas City for most of the game, and it just, there were a couple sequences here and there where the Chiefs get some momentum, and it doesn't spiral per se, but it's they maximize their spots in terms of a punt return, a fumble return, scoring when they get in the red zone. The Chiefs, up until that field goal at the end of the game, all of their scoring opportunities turned into touchdowns outside of, I guess, the missed field goal early in the game, but they were doing their job in the red zone. It just they had to maximize output on offense to win this football game, because their unit on defense is the worst unit in this game. They needed something to click offensively that they hadn't had all season to win this football game. I think that was the run game. I think that was, unexpectedly, I really thought that at some point the Eagles were going to get them and their pass rush to get to Mahomes, especially, with the way Mahomes was moving. But just that guy if there's one takeaway from this game with Mahomes outside of how he played, it's just, I think we continue to underrate how he is as a runner, and just that was unbelievable at the end of the game, like just putting his body on the line to get them into field goal range, but also in the red zone earlier. Like I was just so shocked that he wouldn't slide and like go into contact, and just this was an absolute duel from offensive minds, from offensive line play, from quarterback play, from skill position groups. Just this was, maybe not your favorite Super Bowl if you love great defense, but even then, like I think the game plan, especially from Kansas City side, maybe lesser to extent to the Eagles, but they had their moments. Defensively came in, they knew what they were going to do, and to some extent, like it gave themselves opportunities to win this football game by rallying and tackling and creating those third and longs from like two high shells. This was these were the 1A and 1B of the NFL. These are the two teams, in my opinion, who should have been here. And it sucks that we have to have one winner at the end of it, because I think like both of these teams deserve like all the credit in the world for being the teams they are. But at the end of the day, like Chiefs win. Eagles hopefully get another chance here to get back into it, because they really have a talented squad. And they'll have another year here where they're going to have opportunities to like really fill out that roster. It might be different faces, but like you said, like Faith and Howie Roseman, they should be. None of us would be shocked if it's these two teams again. I think in next year's.
Well, yeah. The thing is, the thing they have going for them is that the offense is going to remain pretty much entirely intact.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Miles Sanders situation, but I think everybody has full faith in Kenneth Gainwell going forward. I think Boston Scott. I mean, they've always been a running back by committee group.
And there's just so many running backs this offseason they could go get to. Like I think they could even upgrade at that position, maybe. Like,
so it's like the offense is going to remain almost entirely intact. The only thing that you have to worry about is potentially a Jason Kelce retirement, something of that ilk. They could kind of throw a monkey wrench into it. Lane Johnson said that he wants to play another 2 years. Mailata's not going anywhere. Sayamalu may or may not. I think they'll try to bring him back. I don't know if they'll be able to pay him what he's worth on the market. However, like we said, I trust Jeff Stalin. I trust Howie. The offense will primarily be intact. The defense is kind of, you can almost look at it as a plus, because that's the spot where they need to upgrade a little bit. So, being able to get, high priority free agents, being able to draft well, you have a top 10 pick come draft time. Like they're in a really, really great spot as far as retooling the defense a little bit. And the good thing for them is I don't see the Giants making a huge leap from now till next year. They could get some help at wide receiver for sure, but we don't know how good Daniel Jones is. We know what the floor is. We know the floor is relatively high, and you can get to playoff games and win a playoff game with the kid. We don't know how great he is, week in, week out. We just don't know. We don't know what we're going to get from the Cowboys. I mean, we know the Cowboys are going to be good. That defense is really, really good. The offense, it'll probably look a lot different next year, but we don't know what we're going to get from them for sure. And then we don't know what we're going to get from the Commanders. I mean, they have a lot of good talent. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of young guys on the team. It looks like they're going forward with Sam Howell, the quarterback. But the point I'm trying to make here is that they're going to be right there in the playoff hunt no matter what next year. So even if they win the division, don't win the division, they're going to be in a spot where they're going to be able to at least make another run for next year. So I think the Eagles should be encouraged overall, but it's just a tough way to end that game, especially – I don't even want to talk about the penalty, because I think everybody agrees the penalty was kind of – it may have been a penalty, a flag, but it never gets called in that situation. You didn't call it all game. Wow. Be consistent throughout the game.
That's true.
It's something that we didn't see during the game. So if you're calling that in the first quarter, second quarter, I thought it was more of a penalty against Juju in the first half, where he kind of tugged Juju on that third down. And I know Juju's being soft. I hate when he's running his routes all pretty and cute, and that you giving him the chance to get up on you and be physical with you. But I thought that was more of a penalty than the last one was. I mean, the ball was people were losing.
Well, that's the important thing, right? Yeah, is the ball was like not catchable at all.
Not catchable at all. And I understand that they did call holding instead of pass interference, but like the ball wasn't. It's just you don't call that in that situation. I really was upset about that, because I felt like it was one of the best Super Bowls I had ever seen from start to finish. I can't remember a Super Bowl where I was thoroughly entertained from start to finish, other than maybe the Eagles, Patriots.
I'd say the 52 was the last one that was like that.
So, I mean, and that's why I wanted to give Jalen Hurts credit too, because I think Jalen Hurts he had a better game than Brady had that day. And I think it's crazy to say that, but
PFF just had him rated as the highest quarterback grade they've ever given in a Super Bowl, apparently. So
I mean, I think
20 points on his back is just nuts.
Yeah, I mean,
and you consider like the narrative going in. You consider the weight of the moment. You consider
makes a big mistake on the fumble and bounces back. You know,
like, he doesn't just bounce back; he bounces back immediately. Like the very next drive, to have that mental makeup, to have that next play mentality. A lot of people saw it in college and thought it was kind of a joke, a gimmick. They would make fun of him working out after games at Oklahoma and stuff like that. And then they kind of make fun of him here for like being so stoic and like that stoic leadership quality that he has. People kind of made fun of it to a certain extent. And can he make the deep throws? Can he do this? Can he be effective on third downs? Like he answered every single question last night, put up 370 plus total yards on really high efficiency. And he had 3 rushing touchdowns and 70 rushing yards. This is like, I think it was a better performance overall than Brady had in 52. But I say all that to say, man, like the Eagles should be very encouraged going forward. I feel like there's too much doomsday. There's too much it's over mentality. I think they'll be fine going forward. And I think the Chiefs are actually the ones that are kind of like in a weird spot because the offensive line is really, really good, right? Really, really young for the most part. But there's going to be a lot of turnover on the rest of the team. As long as Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce are there, you got to feel good about their chances, man. I mean, they found a way to do it with relatively average defenses. I don't want to say they're a bad defense at all. They're not. But relatively average defenses. So I think they'll find a way to be competitive and always be in the hunt. I mean, we have literally only seen them be in AFC championship games in this tenure. But I think their roster is going to look a lot different going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how the Chiefs kind of like address some things and address some needs this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that they have a model they'll continue to follow, and it's about convincing people to go and play there. That's the one thing that'll be tough for them. But I think reinforcing. We just talked about like how important it is to have that one unit that's really good if you're paying your quarterback. And I think for them it's the offensive line, and so reinforcing there is going to be really important for them. And I think they will, just because they know Brown is something they're going to have to deal with, and Andrew Wiley is like a decent right tackle, but that's like the one position I think they could really use to upgrade and on that line. And I think they could like attack. We mocked them Dawan Jones in the mock draft at right tackle, so that could be that would be a good one for them. I think like just add another gigantic human being on the other side of the offensive line. But I mean, not much to say other than how we've summed up. If we don't really want to dive into penalty, sure. I mean, the one thing that I think is interesting is the referee says it's his right hand that he pulls with, and I don't know that they ever showed a camera angle of his right hand, so it's like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, everybody kept saying that, and like, of course he's going to say that after he's in the locker room, had a chance to look at it and review it. Like, I mean, that was an hour after the game. I'm sure he went there and watched it a couple of times, and his phone was probably blown up, and so I didn't really take that into account too much. I know a lot of media guys are using that tweet an hour after the game, after people were visibly upset, and even Bradbury, he said, I was hoping they kind of let it go. But
and I think we have the precedent in the Washington game where like the Eagles maybe got some bad calls against them, and they just like take accountability anyways because that's just who they are. They like, they're like, they're very much like a forward facing, like move on to the next one. Like, as like when you have a good locker room and you're like build up accountability, like you're gonna take the blame for something, even if it's not something that necessarily was your fault in that case.
And right, wrong, or indifferent, like I don't think you just can't end the game that great on a call like that. It's just like it was just a very tough way to end that game. It was one of the highest highs I've ever experienced as a fan. Just watch it from a pure fan perspective. One of the highest highs I've ever had watching that football game. The back and forth. I mean, you had all the storylines. Mahomes' ankle was messed up. Jalen Hurts is balling out of his mind. Like the Eagles. I mean, the Chiefs' offensive line. I have to give Andrew Wiley like a ton of flowers and a ton of credit because he was the only question mark going in. Everybody even felt like Orlando Brown Jr. is not the greatest, but he shows that he survives enough. He's able to just make it look ugly and win just good enough. Everybody was saying Andrew Wiley was going to just get embarrassed, get demolished, especially after what Hassan Reddick and those guys did to San Francisco and to New York. Everybody said it was going to be just they were just going to run over that guy. And he not only held his own, he dominated for stretches of the game. That I don't know if you guys see, but go watch the Patrick Mahomes scramble on third down when they were about to go score to go up 28-21. Or excuse me, 28-20. Andrew Wiley not only pancake, I can't remember who it was, but he pancaked somebody, and he doesn't just pancake him and let him go. He gets on top of him. He's pushing his head into the dirt. He's like laying on top of him. He's like abusing the kid. But that gave Patrick Mahomes enough time. People always talk about the scramble, and Patrick Mahomes scrambles out, and I mean it's a great play. But that's the play that allows him to do that. Like those are the things that go overlooked, and those are the things that go unnoticed. And he deserves a ton of credit because he was the question mark, and he ended up being, in my opinion, one of the biggest strengths for that offense all night because he kept Patrick Mahomes upright. He was very physical in the run game at the point of attack. I mean, he was playing with swagger too. Like, I know a lot of people don't watch offensive line, but he normally doesn't play with that like excitement. He had like a little chip on his chest. You can see it. Like after every good block, he's jumping up. Like, yeah, he's pumping up. He's adamant. Like, so it was really cool to see him kind of like shut people up, and myself included, because I thought he would be by far the biggest weak point on that team because that's what we've seen all year. But that's why you play the game, man. That's what we were saying last night.
Certainly expected Reddick to like have some plays in this game. And I just want to ask you a question really quick because you're the offensive line guy here. Is there something to be said about the Eagles having, maybe taken a lot of their production from the speed rushes of Reddick, and then the Chiefs having a specific set where Mahomes is, dropping back like 8+ yards, and the Chiefs know that they're blocking to that spot, right? That maybe like because of that point that Mahomes is dropping to, it makes it harder for Reddick to win on the speed rush just because he has to reach further.
Yes and no, because it's all about like the first 2 seconds, in my opinion. Like the start is where you get everything, because if you're getting a guy like that, he's primarily a speed rusher. Mm-hmm. He does a little bit of speed to power, but he's not really a spin inside guy. He's not really a cross face guy. He's primarily a speed rusher. That's what he's good at. It allows you to kind of create it's literally called the pocket, but it kind of allows you to create that space and that separation, even from a mental standpoint. You're like, I saw a couple times he just let him run. And it's fine when you just let a guy run. You don't even have to make contact with him. He will run himself out of the play eventually if your sets are right and you're staying on your track. I think that Mahomes having his set spot almost doesn't mean anything because he's so all over the place. Like he'll extend plays, he'll run out of pocket. I think just his natural playmaking ability though allows for an offensive lineman to have a little bit more freedom, like changing up his sets, being more aggressive with his punch. If you want to just, flash, fake a punch and then let him run up the field, I think it allows you to do a little bit of that because he can make up for it on the end. So I think it gives you a little bit more confidence as an offensive lineman, knowing how good your quarterback is at evading pressure, if that answers the question. But I don't really think that the actual drop has too much of an effect on, especially guys at the tackles. I don't think it's as important on the inside, but especially at the tackles, I don't think the drop necessarily affects how you would take your set, or I think it may be more difficult for Hassan Reddick and those guys to get a beat on it because you don't really know where he's going to be consistently. It's just much harder because you have to stay disciplined against him. Yeah. And a lot of the Eagles pass rush is just like, go get the quarterback by any means. It's just, that's what it is. But I do think Patrick Mahomes, I think you hit the nail on the head. His escapability was on full display. Even with the bad will, I don't think people, and myself included, probably took it for granted a little bit, like just how good he is at escaping pressure and evading the rusher. So give him a little bit of credit because they turned it up there the second half. The second half the pass rush was a lot better than it was the first half. He just rose a level above, so I got to give him a ton of credit.
All right.
Yeah, I think you help us put a nice bow on the Super Bowl talk, Kyron. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Super Bowl, man.
It was a great game, man. It sucks we don't get to see like the ending drive from Hurts and see if they can come back and tie it. But it's hard to
just
have
go
like,
best 2 out of 3
games. Yeah.
Week off, another game. Week off, another game.
Here, though. We might get this matchup for a year or two. So
they do. They play in the regular season next year too, so we're going to see a rematch in Kansas City next season. So that'll be fun. But so we'll get them no matter what, which is nice to know. Maybe the Eagles can get some bragging rights back from them. And if they play again, then that'll just be scenes. All right. Let's shift the discussion here. We're going to talk a little about the AFC South today, just in terms of a preview of the offseason for these teams, and this is a division that we haven't really talked about many of these teams for about a month because the Jags obviously were out in the divisional round and none of these other teams made the playoffs. Specifically, like really only the Titans were the team who came close. The Colts, Noah's Colts, were kind of out of it early with a coaching fire early in the season. And the Texans, the Texans, we've been kind of mocking Bryce Young basically since the season started. So, we're long into the discussions of how these teams are going to fix what they're going on with. Let's start in Houston, I guess, because that is the team that, really has been looking forward to what they're going to add here. Cap space, they've managed to kind of build it up. They kind of had to take a hit in terms of dealing with, what they were going to do with Deshaun Watson, getting rid of him, adding some first-round picks. They have extra picks now on day 1, 2 on day 2, and a bunch of extra sixth-rounders on day 3 to add to that roster. They've added young talent in the past draft when they also had a stockpile of picks. They bring in head coach D'Amico Ryans, who is going to add Bobby Slowick, I believe. I don't know if that's, maybe I'm getting his first name wrong. No. Okay. So he's the quarterbacks guy from the 49ers, who is now going to move over and be an offensive assistant for the Texans. Really, I don't know if we've discussed the Ryans hire on this show yet, but I think it's about as good of a hire as the Texans could have made at this point in the offseason for them. They get the guy who played for them, kind of wants to come in and be their culture builder and really add to what they're trying to put together now post Deshaun Watson era. But it's ultimately, for me, like, I think this is a team that has more young talent maybe than they're being given credit for. We've seen some of these draft picks this year. Christian Harris is a guy I think really goes under the radar. He's an Alabama guy, Kyron could probably talk about, who showed up mid-season after some injuries and played really well. John Mechie, we haven't even seen play yet, but he's another guy at wide receiver for them that could fit in as a slot player. They added Derek Stingley, who I think had a better year than people are giving credit for, just because of growing pains of moving into kind of a different system. Jalen Petrie was Kyron's defensive rookie of the year, had a really good season as a safety and kind of a slot corner hybrid type. They have some of these younger pieces, and they're going to add a bunch more. The answer needs to be what they're going to do at quarterback. And I think what's interesting is we've heard they like maybe Bryce Young, but if he's not on the board for them or they're not able to go up and get him, maybe they wouldn't go in that direction per se with the number 2 pick in terms of quarterback. Kyron, what are your thoughts on that?
What is the most pressing need for these guys though? I think defensive line is probably the outside of quarterback. Yeah. We're under the assumption that you said quarterback Bryce isn't there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess you go CJ Stroud. You have to, right? Like,
the idea, I guess, here is like, what if you don't believe in the floor for Stroud? Like, if you throw out the Georgia game, like, there's a lot of people who are still kind of questioning his ability, right? And personally, like, I would probably still go Stroud if it's me. But you hire a defensive coach. Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are in their own rights, like, excellent prospects, right? It's a tough sell, I think, because the answer, I think, if you're not drafting a guy, is you have to go out and probably add a veteran, because you're not probably getting a guy at pick 12.
Yeah, and I'm not trading up for Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. If this is me, so I think that you would go Stroud. I think that you have to. The bones of the team are too good, especially offensively, to not try to put. I think you save the money and use the money elsewhere. I think you try to shore up the defensive line. They need some. Defensive backup for sure. Everyone does. Everybody can always get better on the defensive back end, but they need some guys for sure. And I think they have some promising young linebackers for sure. So I think the trenches is where they need to make the biggest leap, right? I think even with Mechie coming back next year, you got Dameon Pierce coming back. They have a solid, skilled group core on offense. Quarterback, defensive line is all I would be thinking about if I was those guys. And then I would try to, we saw a lot of guys at the Senior Bowl, maybe like a Riley Moss type kid, somebody around like later in the draft, 3rd, 4th, 5th round. They need to try to get DBs, because I think the DBs and the running backs probably maybe the deepest 2 groups of the class, I would say. I think that you can kind of address a little bit of those needs later in the draft. But early, especially, man, like, got to go to quarterback. You got to go to trenches, in my opinion. I think you can't. I don't think the gap between Bryce and Stroud is as big as people think it is. But I don't know if it's viewed that way. I mean, I've heard it is.
Well, we're hearing all sorts of stuff too now. Right. There was even I was listening to someone talking at Super Bowl Radio Road there at the Super Bowl, was saying like there are like birds flying around talking about how Will Levis might be like a guy that ends up going number 1, which we've made our opinions known on this show about that. But if that's the case, the Texans, you could sit at 2 and just take Bryce Young. Like that's about the best case scenario. But I think if I'm in their situation, like, I'm doing what I can to maybe affordably move up to 1 to make sure I get Bryce Young. And if not that, like, I think it's whoever you get between those two quarterbacks, because ultimately I think at 12, like that's a nice range to take a defensive lineman that you feel good about. There's a number of guys that could fit whatever scheme you're trying to build with D'Amico Ryans in there that are interesting. It's a little bit more of a traits than production draft, I think, in this terms of the case of the guys that we are looking at this year, but outside of like Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. But that being said, like there are guys that are intriguing that we saw play it well at the Senior Bowl. I mocked them Keon White at the 12th pick because I think he's a guy that's going to be a fast riser in the coming weeks and should do well at combines. Type of dude that if you're going to run like an even front, like maybe you figure out a position for him that he's going to stick at. But if you're running an odd front, you could very much make him like more of a rotational piece. You could do a lot of different things for you. You could kind of start centering around him. And this is even a draft where the depth, I think, at defensive line is good enough that you could add in later rounds and continue to pick up more guys and really try to round out your depth. You're right. Looking at the linebackers like Christian Kirksey's a decent body. Kevin Pierre-Louis, I think, has been underrated for a few years. He was hurt this past season, but he's played some good football. Cornerback room isn't bad. Steven Nelson, Derek Stingley, Desmond King has like consistently been like an underrated nickel player for a while here. They have Petrie, obviously. The offensive line is actually underratedly like a unit that played like pretty decently this year. Laramie Tunsil was in discussions for all pro votes. Titus Howard has best year as a right tackle.
They have one of the best tackle duos I would say a top 5 tackle duo in the NFL for sure.
Yeah, it's a good tackle duo. Maybe you're looking at interior, but even so, like Kenyon Green, like maybe struggles year 1, but a lot of these guys you kind of bring in and you see what they become in years 2 and 3. You see how they develop. Right. You have to have faith that your 15th overall pick becomes a little bit better. If they're going to add there, I think later rounds, like they might look interior, but this is not like the worst situation for a quarterback to step into just because of that tackle duo, because they have like a Mechie and a Nico Collins. Brandon Cooks might be gone, but if you add another body, that room somewhere, whether you pay like a cheaper receiver in free agency or find a guy later rounds, like this is a roster that has the ability, I think, year 2 to make a jump. And I even think year 1, if it's Bryce Young, like they could surprise some people in terms of the amount of games they could win, just because I do think Young has maybe the floor that maybe some of these other guys don't have in terms of like what you can do coming into the NFL with protection and just, enough separation that, and also Mechie's like was it only a year that he played with Mechie, right? He started last year. Mechie was one of the receivers. So, I guess they have a year of chemistry built up already, but I think that can't be undervalued. Like it's there.
Oh, no. I mean, he caught 100 balls that year, 106 balls that year. Like,
that's just
from Bright. So
that's a lot in a full NFL season, right? So, right. Yeah.
The thing also that, they have going for them is that the division isn't overly tough. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of good young teams. Like the Jags aren't going anywhere. They'll be good. They'll be solid. The Colts are a couple pieces away from being a very solid team. I think that they just have an opportunity to go from worst to best in a couple of years. I mean, really, they have a really good chance to get in there and make things happen if you get your guy in their quarterback. So I got a question, though. Like, let's say that they whiff on all the young quarterbacks and they don't want to, or not all the young quarterbacks, Stroud and Bryce, and they don't want to take a Levis or a Richardson. Who is a veteran guy that would be realistic for them to get? I mean, they have money. They have a decent situation. People really love D'Amico Ryans, and I'm sure that from what I've heard, that a lot of the 49ers free agents are going to follow him to Houston. So, I mean, would a Jimmy G make sense there? I don't know how he feels about Jimmy. He's never really publicly said anything other than sung his praises. So would a Jimmy G make sense? And they can retool everywhere else and kind of upgrade their roster that way? I mean, I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a discussion with somebody who was saying that they could be a team that's looking at the loser of the Purdy-Lance QB battle and trading for them, but that's just strange to me to hear that now because, like, you're not going to know the winner of that quarterback battle until right before the season, right? So you still need to have a placeholder ahead of that. So unless they're, like, long-term planning and they're like, all right, we're going into the year with Davis Mills, we're going to get whoever loses that battle and figure that out. That's a weird one, and one that, like, I don't know. It's like it's weird in a way that I could see it happening because just that's the NFL surprises us sometimes in the way these players link up at different situations. But that would be a longer term play, and I'm not certain I love it because I just think if Lance loses that QB battle, I'm not feeling great about the direction he's headed in the NFL at this point. And I think with Purdy, like, he's intriguing even if you lose a battle, but I don't know. I don't know how I look at Brock Purdy and trading for him and say that I'm more confident about that as a long-term piece than drafting one of these guys at the top. But stranger things have happened. I think Garoppolo is realistically like most likely what they would do. But again, you have to pay that guy, and
ain't cheap.
It's not like there's a ceiling there. Like we kind of know what Jimmy Garoppolo is at this point. So I don't know. I would be a little shocked by that decision, and maybe it's the thing that I think could end up happening, and we've seen from front offices sometimes. It's like they might really, really, really like a Jalen Carter or really, really like Will Anderson to the point where they feel that it's the right thing to do is to pick those players. And not that there's anything against those players, but it's just if you really lock in on a defensive player with that pick, you're kind of limiting yourself because of the quarterback options here. And it's just, that's tough. You would like to be able to get a Will Anderson and a Bryce Young, right? But, you kind of got your blue chip defensive player last year in Stingley, and you got to hope that that's the guy that hopefully takes you over the top in terms of that a little bit.
Well, within DeMeco Ryans' system, though, I thought he had a really good year this year. I mean, people kind of really slept on what he did this year. He had like the second most coverage snaps without giving up a touchdown. And I think that was per PFF. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was PFF that I saw that from. But I mean, if you played, I think it was 300 plus man coverage snaps and didn't give up a touchdown. I mean, he had a really, really good year. It just kind of got overshadowed because the team isn't very good. And then you had the Sauce kid, and then you got Patrick Surtain out in Broncos. It just gets buried underneath all of that success, right? But you got to even think he makes a leap forward going forward in this, DeMeco Ryans system, especially if they can get some pass rushers. So I'm really excited to see Stingley's progression and Petrie's progression, because we saw what he did with, Talanoa Hufanga this year. You got to expect he'll be able to use Petrie in a variance of ways as well. So I'm really excited to see what he does with those young pieces on defense.
Yeah, and I think on the back end, they were kind of moving around different game plans week to week, and it just was a lot. It was purposefully difficult because I think they were trying to kind of develop these guys, get them used to playing different styles of football, and just they were not planning to win a lot of games this season, and poor Lovie Smith gets tossed out because of that. But hopefully that this is not the same. I don't think it is, because DeMeco Ryans is clearly a very sought after head coaching candidate, and if you're hiring him, you're hoping he's your long-term guy. But they need him to be their rock, because they have lacked kind of the consistency, and I think it's a good start for them. But pairing him with a quarterback here would be tremendous for their long-term projections, just because I think if you get Bryce Young and DeMeco Ryans, like, I don't care where you are, I don't care if it's Houston, I don't care if it's Dallas, the Jets, like, you're probably going to be consistently good at some point. I think they got to do everything they can in their power to make that happen.
I'll just be happy when this combine and this pre-draft stuff is over and they can stop talking about him weighing 185 or 190 or whatever the hell it is. Like,
I mean,
come on, bro. Have you watched the kid play?
It's just silly to be like, it's these guys just add weight so easily these days too. I mean, Lamar Jackson had the same discussions, and like
Kyler Murray was tiny coming out.
Yeah, Tyler Murray was tiny, and people are like, oh, he's trunked up, and like he's like 200 pounds because of the way he's built. But I even like people are like, oh, maybe Bryce. There's a report. It's like Bryce Young's played at 165. It's like, look at the guy, like, actually, like, yeah, he's skinny, but his thighs are like actually kind of big. Like, he's not like a stick. Like, I weigh 170 and I don't lift anymore. Like, come on. Like,
and people should go like, and I think that the guys that are making the decisions are doing this. But come on, man, watch the games that he played in and some of the beatings that he took. Go put both of those Georgia games on from the 2021 season. Put the Tennessee and the LSU game on from this year. Put the LSU game on from 2021. I mean, he's taken beating. The Auburn game, both Auburn games, even the one they blew him out this year, he got beat on for a long. I mean, he's taken a lot of hits, and that's not the great thing. I'm not, maybe he should have. He could get the ball out a little bit more. I know he's super good at extending plays and creating stuff out of the pocket and doing stuff off platform. So maybe he needs to mitigate some of the risk going forward. I do think that he can clean that up a little bit. But he's taken a lot of hits. He's extremely durable. The only time he's gotten hurt was when he tried to break his fall, and it was kind of a freak thing with the shoulder. Like, it wasn't from taking the hits and the beating and like the brutality of the sport. He's as tough as they come. That's the thing that like kind of, I don't want to say bothers me, but a guy like Will Levis, they talk about how built up and strong he is, and his body, his pro body, but he was beat up. I mean, he had more injuries than anybody I could think of in college football. Not significant ones, but things that kept him out of a ball game or two, or things that, hampered him in the field of play. And he got hit a lot, just like Bryce got hit a lot. I'm not saying that there's a weight correlation between them. I'm just saying that Bryce is extremely tough, and it's kind of weird that this is what they pigeoned him to talk about. I don't really understand it.
I think people forget about how young these guys are coming into the league too. I'm 25. I feel like I've just finally starting to get a grown man body, I'm putting on weight in a different way now. And it's just so different, dude. He's got so much time to grow, so much room to get bigger. It's just kind of wild that people want to hammer it so much. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is a fun one. There's actually an inverse correlation between size at quarterback and injuries. The bigger guys actually get hurt more. And that's not because being big gets you hurt, but I think when you have a small quarterback, you do your best to protect him more. But also, I think sometimes bigger quarterbacks play a little more recklessly, and that's what gets them injured. And
look at Roethlisberger. Look at Andrew Luck.
Yeah, if you make it your point to protect your quarterback from injuries specifically, that's not a hard benchmark to pass, and if you don't make it a point, you can fail it for sure. But I don't know. It's just, if you're worried about an injury to your quarterback and you're worried to a point that you really don't think you can actually prevent him from getting injured at all, well, there's two things there. One, okay, well, what are you doing? Come on, this is what we're paid to do. But also, two, everybody gets hurt. You can't look at this one injury where his shoulder, like Kyron says, it's a freak fall, and think, oh, he's injury prone because he hurt his shoulder. Everyone's gonna have something at some point. There is not a single player who has gone through the NFL who has avoided injuries their whole career. It's just it doesn't happen.
It's cool. Let's say that's a fair and that's a valid concern. Look at the tape. Everything else that you could want in a quarterback is Bryce Young, man. And I feel like it's not even a homer take because I like Bryce Young. If Bryce Young played for Iowa or USC, I would say the same things because of how he plays. It's just I can't remember who the guy was. I wish I could remember his name so I could call him out. But he said Bryce Young doesn't process at a high level, and I was like, "What are you watching?"
It was an ESPN guy.
I can't remember who it was, but he said Bryce Young doesn't process at a high level, which is the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah,
Bryce Young processes at an insane level. He's tough as nails. He doesn't have when we talk about top end arm talent, which I think he has, because I think the conversation is kind of muddled. He doesn't have top end arm strength, but he has top end arm talent. There's a difference in my opinion.
Yes.
So when we talk about top end arm talent, there isn't a throw on the field that he can't make. Does he have a Justin Herbert live arm as far as velocity and driving throws? It's not that strong, but he can make every single throw on the field. So when you talk about the toughness, the leadership quality, the arm talent, the processing ability, the footwork, watch his footwork. I'm not making a draft comp here. I'm saying watch his footwork and then watch Aaron Rodgers' footwork. It's eerily similar. The way they get off platform, the way they can do stuff, the release, even the way he throws the ball, his throwing motion, his body movement is very similar to a guy like that. He doesn't have Aaron Rodgers' arm talent and arm strength. I'm not saying that, but just watch their mannerisms, the way they move, the way they hold themselves, the way they work off platform, the quick release. It's only that's a skill that only a few people are born with. You don't develop that; they just have that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he has everything else that you want in a quarterback. So I don't really understand the size pushback as much, especially after we've seen Drew Brees, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson is 5'11". He's a smaller guy. We've seen so many smaller quarterbacks make these pushes going forward. And I think that we've just seen that even Tua. Tua is probably 5'11". I've met him in real life. He might be 6 foot, maybe. But we've seen all these 5'11", 6 foot and below quarterbacks have success recently. I don't understand why it's still such a big topic.
Yep, agreed. All right. Well, while we're on quarterbacks, let's do a little shift and let's talk about the Indianapolis Colts, because this is another team that's going to be drafting their quarterback at the top of the draft, and they might be the team that moves up, although there's a lot of speculation both ways. There's obviously you have a push from the top of ownership. It's let's get a quarterback. But Chris Ballard, the GM, is also a resource management type who does not want to spend as much as possible to go up at 1. And they're already at pick 4. It's very reasonable to expect that one of these guys is going to be there. The question is, is the guy you want going to be there? Because at pick 4, it might be Will Levis. And, there's always rumors that say that Levis is their guy. But, personally, Kyron and I not the biggest fan of Levis at 4. It's probably going to happen with some team here on the top of the draft, but will it be Indy? I don't know. In the draft that I did last week, we had them taking CJ Stroud because I think the Panthers are looking at Levis, but and have them trading up for him. But if it's Stroud, Levis, maybe they are trade up for Bryce Young team. I wouldn't be shocked by any of those. People keep saying, "Oh, it's measurables or what Chris Ballard likes when he's drafting." And although that's true, like I think the position quarterback just it becomes different from an evaluation perspective from everything else. So if they're really trying to hit on a guy, they're going to take the best player, period, and they'll do what they can get to get that guy. Cap space, they're not flowing in cap. They've paid a couple of players here long term. Their offensive line, DeForest Buckner, they're signed up with. Their picks are average number of picks, a decent back half here in terms of adding a 5th rounder, doing what they can. They get the pick back from Washington, which is nice. From the Carson Wentz trade, which was a good one for Indy, of course. We knew that all the way back to last year. We have the needs as quarterback because obviously interior defensive line is an interesting one. They have DeForest Buckner still. I think they just need depth there, and maybe it looks like a guy who has more rotational ability, can play edge and inside. But this pass rush was really good at one point a couple of years back, and it's not bad per se at this point, but they could definitely use a boost. And then tackle is an interesting one because although they have developmental pieces on the left side, they haven't locked down that position, and it's hurt them because there's a saying that the offensive line is kind of a weak link unit, and although they have these good players on the interior and the right tackle, you can be good on the other 4 positions, but if you have a hole at the left side, it can be an issue for you, and whoever they end up bringing in at quarterback is going to benefit most from that unit here in Indy at this point.
Yeah, about our interior line, we got Buckner and Stewart, and Grover Stewart is a run defense, is not a pass rusher as much, and so yeah, I think you're pretty spot on saying we need rotational people there, and I think it would be really beneficial to have somebody that can slide in from that the 3 technique all the way out to the outside and give us some depth at the defensive line that we just did not have this year. We brought. I remember assigning like 4 or 5 guys throughout the season to the defensive line, trying to just grasp at straws for anybody that can bring some depth. Guys like Byron Cower and guys like that. They were doing all right, but they were not getting the job done. And we released Afidi. What's his? It's not Deo Dangbo, but it's Afidi Odiangbo.
Yeah, something like that.
And we released him in the middle of the season. I think that was by his request, I would imagine, because he was playing well and playing good for us. So yeah, that's definitely a big need for us. And like you said, Bernard Reinman definitely had a better second half of the season than he did to start, and he went up against a lot of great pass rushers over on that side. But yeah, the left tackle is a big need for us, I think. And it could be Reinman, but definitely need some competition there.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this roster, like safety, linebacker, edge, just decent depth, young players. Corner, I mean, Gilmore's back for another year. I thought he played well enough that I'd even be interested in like maybe trying to see if he can extend that another year, just because he looked good despite being older. Like he really played well and was a part of a defensive unit that was good enough to be one of the few units that slowed Philly all season. It's really just got to be about fixing the other side of the ball, and that starts at quarterback. That probably looks at the offensive line. The receiving core is interesting. Campbell might be leaving in free agency here. He never really hit his stride. I like Pittman. Had a bit of a down year. Alec Pierce is an interesting developmental piece, but I think they probably need to add another body to that room just to see if they can raise the floor of it a little bit. Kyron, when you look at this roster, is there a specific thing that you think identity-wise they need to get back to, perhaps maybe that run game with a new quarterback coming in?
It's tough to say because I think they need to really just upgrade the trenches on both sides of the football. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people have kind of like been taken aback by Quentin Nelson the last year, and I thought that's kind of just silly. I mean, he's still top 2 or 3 at the position. There's no question about that. Ryan Kelly is top 5 at the position. I don't really think there's much concern there either. But the other 3 spots are, essentially very, very upgradable. So it's hard to do that, though, because you do need a quarterback. You do need some help. I think you need some help at receiver. That's some nice pieces, but I don't think they have anybody outside of Michael Pittman that you're like have to account for. You have to game plan for. Like, I think they can use some tight end help. I mean, they could essentially upgrade all across the board offensively. But to answer your question about identity, I think that running the football and getting back to really just dominating in that aspect of the game can help kind of ease some of the transition a little bit. We saw with the Titans. I mean, the Titans weren't a great football team, but they could run the football and they play very good defense, and it kept them in almost every game that they played this year. So I think that they could kind of mimic that a little bit. I mean, but we do. I mean, they got Shane now. Is he the guy that has officially been announced?
Yeah,
he's got a flight today to Indianapolis to supposedly sign the contract.
So the offensive makeup isn't going to be that, though. So the identity for that team is going to be spread it around, throw a little bit, wide zone. I mean, they have Jonathan Taylor, so they're not going to completely abandon the run game, but it's going to be a lot of wide zone, RPO stuff. It's going to be a lot of movement-based offense. They need a tight end for sure now. It's going to be interesting to see because but I think that the roster having those holes allows for you to fill the holes, right? It allows for you to fill the needs. You're not stuck with some guys that don't fit your scheme. They're going to be able to kind of like handpick the guys they want. So I think that'll be able to help them out a little bit. But now that I'm thinking about it, you have to upgrade the tackle position. I think after quarterback, which we're all going to assume they're taking a quarterback here. I'm just going to assume that it's Levis. So if you have Levis, I mean, I don't want to just assume, but I'm going to assume it's Levis. After you have Levis, you guys do have a second round pick, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a second round pick. I think you have to go tackle there. There's a lot of tackles in this.
It's draft. The 36 overall too.
Okay, yeah, so you're gonna have a real. So Darnell Wright essentially could still be there. I don't think that he probably should be, but I think a Darnell Wright could still be there. I think a Broderick Jones could still be there. A Matthew Bergeron could still be there. There's a lot of really, really high quality tackles that I think you could take there, and I think that you have to because you're going to get your quarterback. You have your offensive minded OC that's a head coach now. You have to reassure everything on that side of the ball because I think the defense is probably one of the 10 best defenses in football. I think they're probably even a little bit higher because
they were on the field too much.
Exactly. I was about to say the stats are kind of throw it off because they were on the field so much. They were playing, it's tough to be in that situation where your offense is you're never playing complementary football. Mm-hmm. So I think they're probably even a little bit better. They probably could be a top 7 to 8 defense, at their peak, right? So you don't have as many holes to address on that side of the ball.
I worry. I don't really think of this with Stroud and Young, but I worry with a Levis here that they're not maybe designed, although the run game, especially with a change in scheme, is going to be good, I would expect. I don't know that they're designed for Levis to come in here and play well year one at all. Like, I just think it's a tough place for him to develop immediately. So I would wonder if this is a team that's looking at maybe adding a veteran of some sort, maybe a cheaper guy just to come in and play a little bit early on while they
Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew type, maybe that would actually make a lot of sense, right? Because he played in the system just to get this team going. Because it's I don't think that they lack the pieces. Like, I think they have a very nice structure of a football team that can end up being good if they hit on a quarterback, but it's just going to take a little bit of time to transition this over to the new coaching staff and gain the continuity you're looking for to succeed. And I don't want to hurt Will Levis's development curve if he has to come in week one and play against, I don't know, anybody really.
Conversely, though, I think that I think the days of stashing quarterbacks are over. I truly do believe that. Mm-hmm. There's too much at stake. There's too much money. There's too much. People are too behind the 8 ball. Coaches don't have 3 or 4 years to develop guys and get results anymore. You pretty much have to win now. I mean, people were talking about firing Matt LaFleur this year. Like, you think about how insane that is. I mean, he's been in 3 NFC championships. He's been, he's won the division 4 times. I mean, I don't even remember everything he's done, but he had a very pedestrian average season this year with what I would say is that a very average roster as well. I thought the defense would be a lot better than it was, but the offense is extremely average roster-wise, and people are talking about firing him. So I think the days of stashing quarterbacks are probably over, so he's going to have to do it anyway. So hopefully you don't get a Zach Wilson situation here where it just falls apart. I think that the RPO stuff, the makeup of the offense will allow for him to have a lot of easy throws though to kind of get him going, and his athletic ability. I think he'll have to lean on running the ball a little bit more than he did in college. Hopefully, his body can hold up because he has been, injury laden during his career. But I think you could see like a similar path. God, I feel like it feels sacrilegious to say this almost, but I feel like you can kind of see like the Jalen Hurts comparison between their skill sets. I mean, I don't think that that's debatable. Does he have the mental makeup of a Jalen Hurts? I mean, I haven't seen it on film. I haven't seen it, anything close to that. But they have the same body. They have the same, kind of arm strength. I think Will Levis has a little bit liver of an arm, but people kind of like shortchange Jalen's arm. Is kind of crazy to me. Like he isn't like the most pretty thrower of the football, but he gets the ball where the ball needs to go. And I think the Levis is kind of the same. I mean, he's throwing some pretty balls, but that's probably like 10% of the time. The rest of the time, he's just getting the ball where it has to go. So I can see a little bit of a Jalen Hurts comp there. Like, I don't see it with Levis up here.
Yeah.
It's nothing. And I get that's what people see about his athletic ability, his makeup. But it doesn't matter if you can't process, if you can't think, if you aren't sharp. It's just, I don't see that with him. And I didn't even see it with him when he had his really good year, his junior year at Kentucky. I just didn't see it then. I mean, I want to know what you think about it, but and you too, Noah, it's like I haven't seen the mental makeup, the mental side of the game at a fast enough pace. I think he showed flashes, but consistently, absolutely not. I didn't see like high decision making ability, high processing ability. I didn't see that from him.
Yeah, I think last year when I dove into summer scouting on him, I had him as like a top 40 player, more of a late first, early second rounder, which is what I might have him as similarly, because I thought that the player we were looking at was a toolsy, like maybe a guy who can run the ball. With the injuries, I don't know if he's slowed down a little bit. I don't know if I really Richardson, I think, is way more likely to be a guy you want running the ball earlier in his career, obviously, than Levis. And I'm really not certain Levis is really a dude you want to design a lot of runs for. It's just nice to have a little bit of mobility, and I think he has that. But I wouldn't lean on it, which is sounding like something he might have to a little bit. But a lot of the throws he's making are see a guy open, make the throw. A lot of half field reads early in that system. It becomes a little more complex this year, but because of that, I don't think we saw the step that makes me want to move him up boards. And if I come in this year with summer scouting and I say he's a late first round pick, I don't feel comfortable moving him up to a top 10 grade, because it's just I didn't see anything that would make me want to move him up. I understand the type of player he is. He's still the same guy on my scouting report. Oh yeah, he's tremendous developmental prospect, and he plays the most valuable position on the field. And, he can make these live arm throws, and he has better mobility than most guys who have that arm. But the development didn't really happen this year in a way that would make me want to put him there. And that's concerning to me if you're going to take him in the top 5, which I think ultimately it looks like is going to happen for somebody. It could be the Colts.
So I think that something that people need to take into account is that a quarterback with a live arm and the ability, just putting fear in the defense that they can run the ball, will open up this Colts offense to the extreme, because before Matt Ryan's injury, when he separated his shoulder before he got benched, he could push the ball downfield a little bit. But after that, there was no ability to push the ball down the field at all. And obviously, he had that one big run up the middle. I don't even know when that was, but that was that was one-time thing. So I think that would having that would make our weapons look a lot better. Would make Michael Pittman look a lot better, would make Paris Campbell play more to his full potential, and give Alec Pierce, just give him a jump ball. Give him 2 jump balls a game. Matt Ryan literally could not throw it up for him at all. So, yeah.
Paris
Levis
flashed a little bit this year, too. I thought he had some solid moments where he kind of I don't think he's there yet, but I mean, you saw the light bulb kind of go off a little bit where he had his moments.
I think he can obviously make a lot of plays after he catches the ball, and if you can throw him into a little bit of open space, that could just help him tenfold. But yeah, I think taking Levis, I think if you're right about him not having that quite the highest edge in the decision making, I think that could definitely be a big problem for the Colts this season. And like Nick said about Richardson, how you would want him to run more. I think that's might be what the Colts need to lean on more this season, especially with with our hopefully new head coach who can draw up some pretty great design runs for his quarterback. But yeah, so live
I have a
on.
question for you guys about the cap space situation. Are they in a position where they can free up a lot of cap? Are there a
Yeah,
couple contracts they can kind of get off?
I saw a pretty cool tweet
Oh, no.
just before we started. We can get rid of Matt Ryan's contract, some of it.
Okay.
If we would get rid of Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, Ryan Kelly, which I don't think I want to drop that contract, but Mo Alley Cox and Kenny Moore. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that could give us
expendable.
That could give us
Besides
about
Ryan.
$50 million in cap space.
So you have a lot of flexibility, essentially. Okay. I think all those guys are expendable besides Ryan Kelly. I mean, you can get rid of them.
This is a spot. This is a spot you can convince people to come and play too, just because I've seen what Steichen did in Philly, and I think this is people give a lot of crap because of what happened with Irsay, I think, this year, but this has mostly been a pretty functional organization. Like they, know that to get a quarterback, you kind of have to like go out of your way to go and get a high pick. And I think that's kind of what this season was. And it didn't work out with Frank Reich, which sucks because I do think Frank Reich is a good head coach, but they've been able to get good players in this building, and they've been able to develop the roster up. And you haven't ever had issues in the locker room or anything like that. Like this is a team that I feel like if they can just, build and sit with it for a few years and have an answer at the quarterback position, they should be competitive eventually. Okay. With that, let's move on to the Titans, who finished second in the division this year. It's an interesting one because they have a lot of I don't want to say specific needs, but it's like this is a roster where it feels like they've been kind of trying to fill gaps at every valuable position, like every offseason, just to see if it works. And if it does, they'll be really good. And if not, they have to still replace it next year because they were stop gaps. I like Ryan Tannehill. I think he's a decent quarterback. It's a lot of crap for being, one of these guys who probably rides off of a really good play action game with Derrick Henry. But, he made the offense go when they still had A.J. Brown, which I ultimately think is the thing that killed this team is the loss of an A.J. Brown type talent at wide receiver. But then you look at the offensive line, and they probably could add a little bit there. Taylor Lewan might be going away, and you might need a new left tackle. Corner, I mean, they really had some issues in terms of pass coverage in games where they just got lit up by even talents at quarterback that you wouldn't think would be throwing for 350 yards in a game against any other defense except for this one. But, again, you look at it again, you say, okay, well, Roger McCreary didn't have that bad of a year. They have a good safety duo in Amani Hooker and Kevin Byard. Christian Fulton's been able to play some good football at times. They have Jeffrey Simmons. They have Harold Landry, Nico Autry. They have some good players in this defense. It's just there's something specific that they need, I think, to fit in on that side of the ball to elevate the unit. And then on offense, the plan is going to be the same. I just wonder, if Tannehill's back, if they need what other receiver they probably add to this room, because I do think Treylon kind of played better as the year went on, maybe a little too late, but he was a guy that was a year 2 projection. I don't think anyone expected him to be a Pro Bowler year 1. So he looks like he's developing, but you probably need a dude to replace Robert Woods eventually because he's getting up there in age. And it's a team that's been kind of operating on the premise that they need to be very good at almost every position group to win at the highest of levels with Tannehill at quarterback. And they can do that. But I also wonder if the plan is maybe move on from Tannehill and try to replace him here.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what they do at quarterback. I mean, you've heard a lot with Rand coming over about maybe a Trey Lance deal or maybe something because they have a very good relationship. And I know Trey Lance tweeted out or put an Instagram story post where Rand got announced and was like, I can't remember the emoji, but it was something suggestive, he would be interested to come. So I think that they have a lot of flexibility. They have how much cap space? They have negative 21.
Yeah, I think so. I believe they can free some of that up, but it might not be. I think. Well, here's the thing. So they have an out with Tannehill this year specifically, and I think if they did that, they'd be in the positive again. I don't know how much money they'd have, but they'd have enough to add something maybe. There's a few other players, I believe, that they can kind of cut bait with.
Well, what about Lewan? What about if they cut Lewan?
Well, yeah, so Lewan's one, I think, also that adds some money. So there's some veterans that they could get rid of, but it's again, what direction are you going in? Are you running it back with Tannehill, or are you trying to kind of retool a little bit this offseason? And I think the thing that's tough about it is like Derrick Henry has been the best player on this team basically for the last 6-7 years. And he's been like the engine that makes us go, and he's started to have some injuries, and that's kind of what happens at this is a tough position to play for a long period of time. And like, he's such a tank that he's held up for as long as he has. But if you are aiming for like a year beyond this to be the year you really start contending, can you guarantee that Henry's going to be here and like playing at that level again? I don't know. So that might convince them to bring back Tannehill. I'm a little concerned that Malik Willis was not really ever in Mike Vrabel's plans, and that he's just kind of sitting on this roster. And I don't know if they're ever going to do anything with him, which sucks for him because like clearly he's a guy that needs development and needs a coaching staff to be invested in his development. And I don't know that he has it here. But they need to pick, a direction. And I think the run game for now is clearly their best one. And so for me, like I mocked them offensive line the first round. I think that's got to be an emphasis this offseason. It's just making sure that unit is as good as it can be.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about the prospects of a Derek Carr? Maybe.
I think that works here just because we've seen him work and it works better in offense when they're able to run the ball and run some play action. I think Carr is a little bit better than Tannehill, maybe a little bit more than he's better than Tannehill, but
right.
It's a reset. It's a new face. It might be something that they need. That's something that they might not have to give a lot of picks for. He's a guy who's operated with like not the best pass protection, which is a unit that like is a very good run blocking unit and uses kind of that play action to help with pass protection. I think he could deal with that. So he might fit maybe the bones of this offense a little bit better than initially I think.
So our proposition with him, acquiring him, and then DeAndre Hopkins. And I was like, well, obviously that would be best case scenario for those guys. But after I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It'll be a really good fit with Derrick Henry. The defense isn't bad by any means. I mean, they have some upgrades to make on the back end for sure, but they're a really good defense. I mean, I think that would be a great fit, and that would be clearly best case scenario for the Titans, though.
Yeah. They might be in a situation where they need to make some aggressive non-draft moves to like put themselves in position. And that would be that, right? Like you find a way to get Carr to come over, put some money into him, you cut some guys to free up space, and then you trade for Hopkins. That probably looks like a second round or maybe a little bit more at this point in his career. But this is such a weird roster because you just look at it and like the names stick out. Like they have players and it just feels like they haven't gotten quite the level of play that you'd hope for. And I know they won 12 games last year, and like that's like what they can be. But
they're always injured too. Like really bad injury luck for some reason.
I think they're a good team, but they were like the worst team that was winning games this year.
Yeah, like it's just
every time I saw them winning games, it was like it felt like Mike Vrabel was just pushing his team to their absolute limit and pulling out the win just out of nowhere. And that's just how I felt about them.
It's funny you say that. They had some of like the ugliest wins, but also some of like the best losses. Like that game that Sunday night game at the Chiefs, they probably should have won that. Anything at quarterback and receiver that game, they probably win that game. I mean, the Jaguars game, they probably should win that game for sure. I don't even think that was a fumble at the end. This is neither here nor there. But like they have some of the best wins. I mean, the best losses. That sounds crazy, but they played some of the best in the losses. So it's kind of crazy. Like to me, that says how good the coaching is and everything around them. So when they're playing poorly, they're able to still pull out games. And then when they're playing their best, they can compete with the best. So
there's some of this like Patriots to them from the Vrabelism that like the standard is high enough that they get a baseline of play and effort that makes this team maybe at times look better when they're not as good. But the issue is like, why does it go away when they're healthier maybe? And, maybe the physicality they play with leads to a little bit more injuries, but you need to have, I think, a plan beyond that in terms of depth where, again, like you look at the starters, it's good, but they lack depth at almost every position group. And that's, beyond the initial injuries, their fourth wide receiver is Racey McMath. Their sixth best offensive lineman is either Dylan Radins, who just hasn't worked out, or Dennis Daly, who, is fine, but not a guy you're excited about. Back at quarterback, even like Josh Dobbs really fit in well and like played great, but he wasn't even their initial guy and not somebody that like you enter the year like that you're like thrilled about. Rashad Weaver's your backup edge player, like fine player, like nice. They're really good defensive tackle. Actually, that's kind of where their best position group is. They have Simmons, Tart, and Denico Autry. But linebacker like Monty Rice hasn't quite turned into a guy as your third linebacker you're like thrilled about. Beyond your starting corners, it's Caleb Farley, whose injuries had just derailed his career, along with Terrence Mitchell. Safety Lonnie Johnson Jr., who has been changing positions every other year because it just hasn't worked for him either in the NFL. It's find a position group that you really believe in and get depth there and be prepared to be injured, basically, so that when you have them, you can still win, because I think that's their problem right now.
What is the path for Vrabel here? Because we heard some retirement talk during the season when they went through that stretch where they lost 4 or 5 in a row, and then they kind of got in there a little bit towards the end of the hunt. But and I mean, saw him down there in Mobile. He didn't look like he was. I won't say too much, but it's just like I don't really think that Vrabel has a lot to prove in any sense. Like, he was a great player. He's proven to be a great coach. I think they have tough days ahead of them rebuilding this franchise. I don't think that they're like in dire straits or anything, but they're not to the level that Mike Vrabel wants to compete at every year. And the only reason they were even competitive this year because of how well him and the staff kept it together. So is there a scenario here where Mike Vrabel probably ends up stepping away a little bit?
Yeah, and they added a lot of prospective assistant types this offseason too, which is interesting. Like, they would take a lot of position coaches or really good teams and not even give them like coordinator jobs, like give them like assistant pass game coordinator on defense or offense, and just like the type of position that like you're either like trying to add guys because you're a real contender and you just want more dudes in your staff to maximize, or you're making some sort of long-term plans, and maybe that's what they're looking at, is because Charles London was like a real offensive coordinator name, and maybe even like eventual head coach name guy who got a passing game coordinator position for the Titans. Chris Harris is like a really good defensive backs coach that gets a defensive passing game coordinator job where he's still not even the defensive coordinator, but he's just a little bit of an upgrade from being a DB's coach, moves to Tennessee because maybe they're promising him something in the future. So, yeah, I'd be interested I'd keep an eye on that, because I think there was definitely a difficult time working with the front office from his perspective. Like, he did not like some of the decisions they made. Clearly, the AJ Brown thing he wasn't happy about. I think a lot of these draft picks, like, he's not necessarily on the page with.
Yeah, he was very adamant. Like, he was very open about, I don't want to say his disdain, but he wasn't very supportive of the Malik Willis pick from day one. You saw that for sure. He was very vocal about that. So 100%, there's been some headbutting with the higher ups here.
Yeah, and I will say, like, Charles London seems like a nice fit from Malik Willis. Like, if you're gonna have an eventual guy who's his offensive coordinator and or head coach, like, that's outside zone. What Atlanta was running is what they're gonna be bringing over. So
they even promoted in-house for OC, like little things like that. Kind of lead me to believe that maybe the writing's on the wall a little bit here. But you think Vrabel would stay retired in that aspect, or you think he maybe?
I was going to say, do you think he'll take a year off and then go somewhere else?
I think that's very possible. I think that maybe even head coach in waiting for
Patriots.
Yeah, so like maybe that's what I've been thinking the whole time. Like I think that's like, I don't think that he would go work under him right away. But if there was a guy to ever take over the fold in New England, it has to be Mike Vrabel, right? If you're just spitballing names,
he has done the best job of. There's this long discussions about the Patriot way doesn't work anywhere except for with Belichick, because Belichick like embodies it, and none of these other guys, all these other guys are fit. Like Matt Patricia isn't a Patriot way type. Like, he's smart, but like he's just not like the disciplinarian type that works for that. Vrabel, like, kind of funny enough, although no one's really ever talked about it, has been the best at it. And it just, that would make a lot of sense. That would be kind of cool to see.
And I feel like they don't necessarily pinpoint it back to the Patriot way, just because I think he presents himself like he does it on his own, in his own way, and has his own little additions to it. But yeah, man, I don't know if I would be happy to see the Titans lose Vrabel. I don't know if that would outweigh like me seeing him go to the Patriots and just being like, damn, they're just gonna keep being good and just continue that. But yeah, that's really, really, really interesting.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep an eye on that. Let's get this last team in here because we're already at 12:15. Let's talk about Jacksonville really quick, which I think it's pretty straightforward for them. Like they have their quarterback, they need to fill out this roster. I think, offensively they can make some tweaks. They paid a lot of guys already. They're going to be a little bit in the hole on cap space. Some of these effective 1 year deals that are 2 year deals, they were already planning to probably release this season. But they have some draft picks here, an extra 4th rounder, a couple extra 6th rounders. I would expect they're going to try and add depth on the offensive line at wide receiver where, they're already kind of young, but like they could maybe get younger, have some developmental types, try to upgrade on average-ish units on both ends that have been good enough to kind of support the offense. And then defensively, like, you draft Trevon Walker number 1 overall. He's a long-term plan type guy. You're hoping year 2 you see a jump, even year 3 probably you're hoping to see a jump from him. Josh Allen has become kind of the name on that defense that like consistently performs, but you could probably fill in between the two, a defensive tackle, linebacker. They've invested a lot. I don't think they'll go back to that realm, but corner, safety, position groups they've invested at, they're young at, they have good players. There's a lot of position groups here where it's like, these are decent players. They're younger. They might make a jump. And we haven't quite figured out yet which players that they really should be, keeping around are, which aren't. It's like we kind of need another year to like watch, and they're just going to kind of willy-nilly like figure out like they might just go in this draft and just take the best player on the board and just see what happens, because the holes in this team are a little bit blurry in my opinion.
Yeah, they aren't really weak anywhere. So these are like the hardest rosters to talk about for me because they aren't necessarily weak anywhere, but they have clear upgrades they need to make. So that's like the hardest part, discerning which group needs to upgrade the most. And I don't have an answer for that. I think that they're like really good offensively. I think they're really good on the offensive line. I think they have one of the most underrated offensive lines in the game. I think there's still probably definitely some room to grow and kind of push into the upper echelon. I think they're probably like anywhere between 10 to 12 right now. If I had to like put them in my rankings, I think I had them like 11. But they can definitely make a jump. The difference between 11 and like top 5 is huge, right?
Yeah.
So they can make a big upgrade there. But is that more important than kind of upgrading the skill group a little bit? I mean, Etienne's great, but you have Calvin Ridley coming. But I mean, is Calvin Ridley enough? Do you think he's enough?
There's a chance that Ridley fits into this team and they're like a 11, 12 win team. Like I don't know. Like it's possible, but they also might not do anything for him.
100%.
Yeah.
Did like Zay Jones and Christian Kirk perform at like their highest level? Are we going to get that same kind of production? Do we think?
Totally
and Ingram as well. I feel like he had a crazy good season compared to what people were expecting.
Well, yeah, Ridley coming back is going to take a little bit of the targets away from those guys, but it may create a more effective offense though. So risk reward there for sure. But the great thing about them is that they have the quarterback. They don't have to worry about that, and that's the biggest component, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people have to worry about getting the quarterback first. They at least have that. They have the running back. How long does Brandon Scherf play? Like that's going to be he's getting up there in age a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see how long he plays. But the makeup of the team is ideal. Is what you want going forward. You have very little tweaks to make them go from really good. Well, I won't say really good. Go from good to really good, possibly great.
And I have personal confidence in this coaching staff. Doug Peterson's not. He's not on the Andy Reid level of coaching, but I think he's a good coach, and I think that they've established themselves here by making this playoff run and winning some big games this year. Like Kyron says, I think the offensive line, especially as like a run blocking unit, like really showed out this year, helped Etienne get going. He had a really good year. They needed that from him because just year one, him missing the whole season, and really got to kind of see that draft pick look more effective than maybe even I expected it to be.
Well, listen, a lot of people kind of shit on Urban Meyer's draft picks, but a lot of those picks a lot of those guys are balling for these guys, man. I have to give Urban a little bit of credit for the roster building because he brought a lot of these guys into the fold. He might have been a terrible coach, but he's a great CEO. He's always been a great CEO.
Yeah, I mean, Andre Cisco is a baller. Like we knew that up at Syracuse. He was our guy. But Walker Little, I think there's a chance that they might let Cam Robinson go because Little like really played well this year. I would even I don't know how much guard Robinson's played. I don't even know if that's like in his realm, but I know for a fact that Walker Little is not going to be a guy just because of his build that's going to be able to play guard because he's like, 6'9", 300 pounds. Yeah, Robinson's a little tall too, but he's.
Only question I have there is that are they going to be able to pay Jawan Taylor where he could be able to get on the free agent
Okay,
market?
so maybe I'm thinking it wrong. Taylor's the one who's going to be up. Okay.
Well, I think Cam will be the one that they I hate to say this as a Bama guy, but they should try to do everything in their power to keep Walker Little and Jawan Taylor.
Yeah.
Cam is probably the guy that's expendable, even though he's played very solidly since you drafted him. He's not a bad football player at all. In fact, he's quite good.
Yeah.
But those young guys are the ones that they really stepped up there at the end of the year. Do you think that's worth the investment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be tough to be paying like contracts to Taylor and Cam Robinson just because, again, like you say, like I think they're both valuable players. It's just I don't want to put a ton of money into both of those guys because I just don't think either is – they are the type of players that at their best, they're going to hit the Pro Bowl for the first time. And I don't know that they're going to have like many of those seasons, but they're also like their floor is doesn't come out that much, like they play well enough that they don't have terrible games. I think you're probably right. Taylor's probably the guy they keep around. They probably slide Little in at left tackle, and then they probably need to make some more investments at that left guard position. They drafted Luke Fortner last year. Ben Barch is a fine player. Like they got a nice little depth player, and his story is awesome. But I think they could upgrade on him. I think Ridley at receiver slots down some of these guys, makes them look better as the second and third options. But it's likely that either Evan Ingram or Zay Jones, maybe even all of them, including Marvin Jones, are gone next year just because of the way those contracts are structured. Because it was a predictive mock, I ended up having them take Michael Mayer in the first round, who I don't know that I love as like a first round option for a lot of teams, but I think Trent Baalke just kind of has some weird drafting decisions where they like unique players, and that would make sense to me. I wouldn't I think the fit, it's more about like the slot for them. Like, I don't know that I would take him that high in the draft, but I think the fit is interesting. Like, I think Michael Mayer and Trevor Lawrence would be like a really fun combination. I'm not certain it maximizes the roster to the degree that they need. I think if there's one position group, I really think that they could attack maybe if they have some money to spend or just I think adding a really good interior defensive lineman could be important for that defense because I think they do have, decent depth as a pass rush unit. I think they now have their edge guys who could be really good especially if Walker takes another step. And I think he showed you some flashes. I might have been low on him coming out. I don't know that they should have taken a number one overall, but he's a good player. Just getting, maybe Deron Payne becomes a free agent, just getting somebody in the middle that can really be an enforcer and play on 3 downs and maybe rack up sacks as an interior defensive lineman. They don't have that type yet. And if they can find that, I think that really could add an element to their defense that they're lacking right now.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's even a couple guys in the draft that you could look at that could maybe fit into that role. I mean, I was super encouraged from what I saw from a Keanu Benton. Maybe a guy like that falls to the 3rd round and he's able to make a huge impact for you in the run defense and getting after the pass rush and after the passer. So I think that he has a lot of ability. I think that defensively, like I said earlier, they don't have a lot of holes. They were a top 10 defense, pretty much all season. So how do you feel about them at corner? I think they could maybe upgrade it. Everybody can upgrade a corner.
Everyone could always I think you're never wrong to draft a corner with a high pick ever. I like Griffin. His contract also might not be here forever. Campbell has really been better than I expected. Darius Williams is a good signing. If they're trying to upgrade, they need another outside guy. They probably do need another outside guy just in terms of depth. So I wouldn't be shocked actually if they went corner in the first round just because of that. They could also use probably another safety. Jenkins and Cisco have been good, but they, Wingard has also played maybe better at times than I've expected from him. But I wouldn't be shocked if Brian Branch is somehow still on the board at that point, just because of the way he fits into what team's draft plans. He could fall there. If they look to add him as the nickel and push Darius Williams out. But this is the fun thing about this team is we're talking about all these different directions they go with their draft picks because of the way they're built. And that's it's good because they are really in a position where if they really like a player, they can make arrangements to add that player to the roster and develop him.
100%. Last thing for me, they're just in the best spot roster wise, coach wise. They're in the best spot in the AFC South right now as far as projecting towards the future. There's no doubt they're probably sitting pretty. They're thinking that they can run the division for the next 3 to 5 years for sure. They should be.
I'm worried about them.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of teams in the AFC South can make a huge leap, or we can see a huge regression from a team like the Titans, and then a huge jump from like the Colts or the Texans. But I think the Jaguars are probably the team that's going to be the most consistent over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think that rests on, Lawrence is making that step this year, a roster that they, smartly like averaged out and just making a pretty good coaching hire. Like it just, you got to shoot for a high floor in a lot of ways to allow your quarterback to develop. And they did a good job with that after, the Erdmeyer thing maybe not working out initially, but nice little bounce back here. Jaguars, yeah, I agree. I mean, they're the team to beat right now in this division. And it'll be interesting to see like how much they can improve. Because I think there's a world where they're just a similar team next year, but there's also a world where the Ridley thing really does push them over the top. Yeah. All right, Noah, because it's your division, this is your home. I'm going to let you. Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
I just hope the Colts really don't take Levis. I don't know. I'm pretty much with you guys, but I'm excited for the future for the Colts, and yeah, the AFC South is wide open. No matter how good the Jaguars were this year, it's as wide open as it's ever been. So let's hope for some good Colts football in the future.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in to this show. I'm going to let Kyron let you know where he is going to be putting all his stuff up, pal. How about that?
Yeah, right here at Kyron Samuels on Twitter, and then you get everything else. I mean, I'm a Twitter guy for sure. So you catch me there, and that's where all my stuff will be. And then we got a lot of stuff coming. We got some XFL start stuff this week, so we'll have a lot of player exclusives. That's some stuff that we actually need to talk about off camera. But a couple of XFL friends want to do some content, some weekly content, and kind of do like a weekly review. So that'll be fun. That'll be some good content stuff for us. And USFL is coming up. I think that kicks off 2 months from today, I believe. But they're getting ready to go to like camps and do all that stuff. So besides NFL content, there'll be a lot of other football content coming here soon. So it'll be fun for sure. So good stuff for us, and we'll have a lot of stuff to come out for the people here soon.
Yeah, looking forward to that. We have some. We just put up a Bryce Young All-22 break, and not really a breakdown, a little bit of film review, but that we did the other day.
It was really good.
We're getting into it a little bit with some of these quarterbacks. We might have Stroud up soon, and I think I'm working on Jalen Carter. Actually, might look at a little bit of that. And Kyron's going to be doing some offensive line stuff as well, so that'll be cool. Noah, anywhere that you want people to reach you?
Yeah, man, at No Ashtray Sports. That's my Twitter handle. But we are live, and we are producing content on DefiantTakesFootball.com. Go check it out. Reagan, our boy, he built a nice website. I love it. I'm really excited for all that. Quick shout out to Max. Couldn't be here today doing dad duty, but I think you two, Nick, and you and Max will be back Thursday doing franchise tag news, QB prospects, and the AFC North, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, but AFC North, I think, is definitely in the cards, and we're going to be looking at quarterbacks for sure. I actually have to start watching more of them now.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. You can find me at.
Thank you, Noah. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, Noah. I always, we always forget to shout out Noah. Noah, you make the train. You know, you're the oil to the engine here. So
I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate it.
Every show's producer does not get enough shout outs, and Noah is our version of that for sure.
I'm happy to be in front of the camera a little bit too, like talking with you guys.
Well, we like having you here to talk with us as well, especially when it's your division and we get to talk about the Colts a little bit. It's good stuff. Thank you for watching. For real this time. I'm at Nick Merriam. You can find me at Nick with Sports on Twitter. All my stuff is there and at Defiant Takes Football. And here on Monday and Thursday mornings, you can tune in at 10 a.m. We'll be back on Thursday with AFC North talk, quarterbacks, prospects, and maybe something else that I'm going to have to go figure out, and maybe I'll tweet about it once I do. But until then, I'm Nick Merriam. That's Kyron Samuels and Noah Ashtray Sports. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace.